So Donald Trump, Kid Rock, Tucker Carlson, Dana White all come out at UFC at Madison Square Garden, and the whole arena erupts in cheering. This is massive. Democrats know Joe Biden can't win. His polls are in the gutter. Trump is winning in aggregate. And when Donald Trump has New York City cheering for him and Tucker Carlson and Kid Rock, it doesn't paint a very good picture for the Democrats. However, Gavin Newsom is probably going to be their ace in the hole, and at some point he's going to announce he's taking over. Vivek Ramaswamy masterfully calling them out, saying, we know he's running a shadow campaign. We know Biden's not going to be the guy. So we got news out of California. Gavin Newsom is admitting that they only cleaned up the homeless problem because Xi Jinping was coming, and this is a big scandal. And then we'll talk about, we've got this, there's another podcast you may have heard of, H3H3 and Leftover, and Hassan Piker. They do a show called Leftovers that apparently is in jeopardy. And this is a pretty popular left-wing show. It's in jeopardy because Ethan Klein is married to an IDF veteran. He is Jewish, and Hassan Piker is absolutely pro-Palestine. And it's resulted in some very tumultuous circumstances where on some of their live shows, you've got 30,000+ people in the chat just spamming free Palestine and from the river to the sea and things like this. And it's leading to some very serious tension that I think exemplifies very much so the implosion that we are seeing here in the culture war. Even people on the right, from pro-Israel to pro-Palestine, and on the left, it's creating very interesting dynamics. So we're going to talk about all of that, my friends. But before we do, head over to timcast.com, click our documentaries section, and watch Infringed. We launched a documentary last week with Lauren Southern. It's an amazing view of gun rights in the United States. And if you're a fan, you should definitely check it out. Become a member to support the work we're doing, because if you like gun rights and you like the documentary, support us by becoming a member so we can make more of these things. But more importantly, share it with your friends and family members if they're not super familiar about how these things work, and to give them a general idea of gun culture from people who know about guns. Too many of the people in this country trying to pass laws don't know a dang thing about it. By becoming a member, clicking join us, you'll get access to the documentary as well as our members only uncensored show, which will be coming up just after the main portion of the live show at 10 p.m. And you'll get access to our Discord server where you can actually send in questions and talk to us in the uncensored portion, talk to us and our guests. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about this and a whole lot more is Aaron Mateo.
Good to be here.
Who are you? What do you do?
I'm a journalist. I write articles. I'm with The Gray Zone, thegrayzone.com. I also write for some other outlets too. And I've been in independent journalism for a long time.
And you get kicked off trains.
I got kicked off a train today on my way here, yeah. But I made it.
You were confronting a senator.
Yes. Senator Chris Coons was sitting right across from me. And I had to take the opportunity to ask him about his stance on Gaza. He opposes a ceasefire. So I asked him about it. He didn't take kindly to it. And
yeah, he just said, we're in the quiet car. Stop talking to me.
He's right. We were in the quiet car, so I did violate the quiet car rules, although I did speak in a quiet voice. And after, about 2 minutes, he got up and left and then came back and had me move, and I did move. And eventually, he walked by me again and saw me. I think that triggered him. And next thing I knew, the next stop, I was asked to leave the train.
Wow. So even after you said okay and you left the car and went somewhere else, he came and got you kicked off?
Correct, because the Amtrak attendant said, unless you move, you're going to be removed. So I complied.
Wow.
And then I went and sat in the same car, and he happened to walk by, saw me. I looked at him. I didn't say anything though, because I'm respecting the new rules that were imposed on me. And I think that triggered him, and so I was gone.
Right on. Well, this should be interesting. So thanks for hanging out. We have a lot to talk about. We got Libby hanging out.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to be here. I'm Libby Emmons. I'm the editor-in-chief with the Postmillennial and HumanEvents.com.
I'm Ian Crossland. Dude, Aaron, it sounds like the vibration of your presence was making noise in his head.
I think it was. Like that was his conscience.
It was feedback. Is it mate or mate? How do you say it? Mate?
Yeah.
Mate. You got it both wrong.
I like it.
Yeah, that's fine, but I don't
mate.
care. Say how you want. It's okay.
Thanks, man. Is there an accent over one of the
there
E
is,
on
yes.
the end? Cool,
yeah.
man. Good to see you. Well, hey, I'm Ian Crossland. My interviews have been wild this last week. I interviewed Jimmy Corsetti on Friday. We talked about Atlantis, and I'm still fired up about it. So if you haven't seen him, check him out after this show. I'll remind everybody again. Let's rock and roll.
And I'm Serge.com. And I'm ready to start when you are, Tim.
This is the big story. It actually is pretty interesting. Donald Trump greeted by cheers upon arrival at UFC 295 in New York City. It wasn't just Donald Trump. It was Tucker Carlson and Kid Rock. And I must stress this for you all again. In New York City, probably, what is this, the deepest blue can be in this country? Well, no, that's not fair. I mean, I guess Portland, maybe.
Well, and they did flip a city council seat last week, a
Wow.
city council seat in the Bronx.
Wait, to Republican?
Yeah. And there was another flip, I think, in Long Island.
Wow, this is getting
New
crazy.
Yorkers are getting pissed. They're tired of all this garbage.
I think seeing Donald Trump get massive cheers in New York City should be, as soon as I see this, I'm like, all the polls that are claiming Trump's within a point or two above Joe Biden, they're wrong. He's got to be higher than that. You look, I know we can all say that UFC fighters are based, and so the fans are probably more, right-leaning or whatever. I don't believe that. The people I know who are watching fights, they're just regular people. UFC is a mainstream popular sport, and Donald Trump shows up in New York City to Madison Square Garden, and the crowd goes nuts. I think it's fair to say Joe Biden can't win. But I also think everyone listening to this show already knows it's not going to be Joe Biden anyway, right?
Well, and these are probably a lot of people from New Jersey also. There's like New Jersey and New York in the crowd.
Yeah, but it's all blue. It's all
No,
Democrat.
it's awesome. Yeah, I think it's great. Did you see Bill Burr's wife was flipping?
Oh,
on?
yeah.
That was great too.
Yeah, she flipped off Trump.
She
from
flipped
behind.
off Trump from
See,
behind.
it's
for
New
her.
York. It's not
Yeah.
all love for Trump, I
Sure.
guess.
Yeah.
People express.
But so what's our prescription here, or what's our prediction is probably the better way to put it. It's Donald Trump in New York City getting thunderous applause with Tucker Carlson. Okay, I'm just right there. I mean, Tucker Carlson's walking through Madison Square Garden,
Right.
everyone's screaming and cheering. Okay, it's not a good sign for Joe Biden in 2024 and the rest of the Democrats. I think in in Kentucky, the last election last week, the only thing Democrats won was the governor's race, and it was super close.
And it was an incumbent. So I mean,
Right. Incumbent advantage. And then the rest of all these other positions ended up going to Republicans. So it is looking like, at least right now, based on what we saw last week and a lot of people are saying it was really bad for Republicans. But I think what we're seeing right now in New York City, you mentioned them flipping a seat. I don't see how Democrats can win unless they radically shift their strategy right now.
What about all of the wins that we saw last week? Like in Ohio, they had a sweeping abortion law that was like a constitutional amendment, and then a number of other places.
Those are wins for Democrats.
Yeah, we saw a lot of Democrat wins last week.
They legalized weed in Ohio.
They legalized weed in Ohio.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake Republicans are making. Who was talking about this? I don't know. Maybe Mike Cernovich was tweeting about it. Abortion is generally popular in the United States to the point where people don't actually care the full extent of what's being legalized. The pro-life position is not going to win out.
Yeah, it's something that if you want to actually make a pro-life change, you've got to somehow get the population to follow you for other reasons, and then kind of subconsciously get them to become pro-life. But screaming it is not going to make people.
This is why I think it's important to, like, if you're pro-life, it makes more sense to advocate against abortion than to advocate for abortion to be illegal.
Yeah.
Like, they're not the same thing. Abortion can be legal and you can encourage people not to do it.
Right. Showing the morality of it, I think.
Yeah.
Watching the baby get dismembered in the womb as it's being
Or just
pulled out.
offering more options for moms. Like, you can be a mom. It's okay. You know?
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was mentioning how he bought something. Well, I don't want to give out too many details because it's this other dude's private life, but he was trying to help a local kid with some extracurricular activities, and this family was not very well off. So he said, "Let me help you out and buy you some stuff to help your kids." And when he said this, a bunch of people started calling him a creepo and a pedo for helping this little girl with like her school stuff. And he was like, "Man, I felt so bad. I was like, what did I do something wrong? Like, why are people yelling at me? Like, posting online, like, hey, I just, was buying this stuff for this family." And they attacked him for it. And I'm like, it is really funny that there's a cultural narrative for guys. Like, we have all these stories where a guy's sitting on an airplane, and then it's like he'll be sitting next to a kid, and the flight attendant comes up and says, "You have to move because you're a man sitting next to a child." And then we've had these for years. And then for women, you have these stories where it's like, oh, don't have a family. It's bad for the environment, or you're not going to have fun, or you're going to regret it. It's like, man, they really don't want people having kids.
No, they don't. And they don't want people around kids. They just want to get rid of kids entirely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I guess. But at any rate, I don't know. Where are we at?
I got a prediction on this. Gavin Newsom comes in on a chariot of fire, and everyone's like, why is this guy? But then the media pushes him so hard for a year, and they're like, Trump bad, Newsom good, and you get a bunch of people behind it. And then unless we have election integrity and the votes are on machines behind the scenes, I have no way to verify whether or not the votes are going to get hacked and flip 51-49. But I don't trust the process if it's done secretly on proprietary machines these days.
I just don't. I got to be honest. I don't know where we're at in terms of like, I have a general idea. Joe Biden can't win as of right now but there's got to be some kind of insane and dramatic change that happens over the next several months in order for there to be a viable race for Democrats in 2024.
But look at Joe Biden's entire career. He's a serial liar. In the 80s, when he was running for president, he was caught plagiarizing the speech of a British politician, his whole life story. He's demented. He thought he was fighting apartheid in South Africa. He thought he was fighting for civil rights in the U.S. So he's out of touch. And I think accordingly, he's going to be out of touch enough to believe he has a chance. And I think he'll stay in the race.
Yeah, but they got to remove him, right? I mean, so there's a couple views. One is that the deep state, whatever you want to call it, is like, why won't Joe Biden stop? We need someone else. We can't win. And so now you're seeing all the Hunter Biden stuff bubble up and the threat of impeachment and conviction. If Joe Biden doesn't leave, people think they're going to remove him by force from office.
In a speech, I think, was it today? He said President Harris.
Well, he said that like 8 times.
I know,
already.
but he says it a bunch. I think he's really just trying to get us used to it.
And they'd have to remove her too, because obviously they can't run her as well because she's so unpopular, probably less popular than he is. So the impeachment could actually have some legs if people inside his own party get behind it. But the problem is the impeachment has to do with Ukraine, and they're sensitive about that because they're so embedded in Ukraine and they don't want to admit defeat there. And the Ukraine impeachment gets to Joe Biden's corruption there and his big role in causing this whole mess.
Well, this is why I'm saying I don't know where we're at, because that's a really great point. If they move to him, if Joe Biden won't leave and they know he's going to lose. Okay, hold on, slow down. If Donald Trump wins, all their war plans are going to get screwed up. Mm-hmm. It's not like, Trump's going to just end everything overnight, but he's certainly not going to give them what they want. So they can't have Donald Trump, but he's the front runner for the Republicans and he's going to do really well. So then they have Joe Biden. Okay, well, if Joe Biden stays in the race, he's going to lose and they're going to get Trump. Can't have that. But if they try to remove Joe Biden using impeachment, you're right. It's Ukraine. And now, whoopsie daisy, how many other people are going to get caught up in whatever that disaster is?
They do have him, though, on the classified documents case. There is an investigation into that, which we forgot about because it gets buried. But they could pull that out. If they really wanted something to get him on, they could use that.
And if they do, then they come back and say, oh, look, we're being fair. Trump, you can't be president either.
Yeah.
I think if they go after, every time I see them talking about the Biden classified documents, I think this is just a way to get Trump because they don't care what happens to Biden and they want Trump out of the way.
Well, if you're someone inside the establishment and you hate both Biden and Trump for your own reasons, then this classified documents thing, it's like you kill 2 birds with 1 stone because you pretend like you're applying the law equally.
Yep.
You claim you're upholding justice and you get them both. So if I'm making a prediction, I think they're going to go with that. If they really
so is it going to be Newsom versus DeSantis?
Aren't they debating soon?
They are.
Aren't they having that happen?
That's the plan, yeah.
The thing is, I don't think you can stop Trump. He's just shown to be so resilient. He freestyled his entire 2016 campaign.
Right?
He's inevitable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he has
It's inevitable.
If you look at him physically, he has a terrible diet, but he just seems indestructible. He's 77 years old, so the only person who can really stop
He's always
Trump.
out there playing golf anyway.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are you going to say the only person that could stop Trump?
The only person who can stop Trump is Trump himself.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
true.
Somehow
That's true.
he hangs it up personally, but otherwise, I just don't think all these cases against him, like.
What is he facing? 700 years?
Yeah, but you look at them and you go, I mean, maybe on the classified documents one, there's something. I don't know. I don't know that one too closely. But the other ones, like the racketeering case in Georgia, it seems everyone who's not a hardcore partisan Democrat understands what's going on there, I think.
With the documents.
It's all BS.
I don't think that they get him on the documents because you have Judge Cannon in Florida who has now pushed the court date back. And she said, we're not going to do this on an accelerated schedule. So that's just going to drag on for a while. I think they have a better shot of getting him on the January 6th case because they've got a gag order slapped on him already, right? And they're really going to go hard after him on that one. They have a judge who has already, with other January 6th cases, advocated for or issued sentences that are longer even than the Justice Department had asked for. I think that's where I think they're going to get him in that one, and I think they have a shot at getting him in Georgia.
How would you describe yourself politically, if you would, Aaron?
Traditionally left wing.
So
And the meaning of that has changed in recent years
Right.
because now to be left wing, you have to side with neocons to support proxy wars like in Ukraine. But
Which is weird.
Yes,
Doesn't
exactly.
make sense.
where I come
Comes
from,
full circle, they say.
yeah, exactly. So I'd say traditionally left wing.
So that's why I think it's interesting because, based on your political views, where you are people calling you right wing? Have they been calling you right wing for some time?
Yeah, ever since I started opposing Russiagate, which I thought was the dumbest thing of all time. And it speaks to this issue we're talking about, this desperate effort to get Trump and also undermine any diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia by calling him a Russian asset and all the conspiracy theories that came with that. Ever since I started questioning that, I was called right wing. I was called an apologist for Trump, even though as a side, even if I didn't care about facts and being a journalist, which is what, when you're a journalist, you're supposed to follow the facts no matter where they lead for partisan purposes. Putting that aside, from a political point of view, I was also against it because I thought it was a big gift to Trump. Because what's a bigger gift to Trump than trying to oppose him from the sole point of view, and this really was the obsession of him being a Russian asset, like putting all your eggs into the basket of a crazy conspiracy theory. I thought it was a big gift to him and the Republicans. And so because I was opposed to that, I was accused of supporting Trump.
And then you were critical of war in Ukraine.
And then I was, because one of the reasons why I hated Russiagate was because it also promoted this neocon narrative that we should not have diplomacy with Russia, that Russia is responsible for all of our problems. And it's a good thing to fight the war in Ukraine rather than resolve it with the peace accords that were on the table. That's what Trump's first impeachment was about. People forget this. He was impeached for briefly pausing some weapons to Ukraine while allegedly pressuring Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. And by the way, the case, if you looked at it, never had any actual evidence. Trump did make some dumb comments in a phone call to Zelensky, but the fundamental charge against Trump, that he was like leveraging U.S. weapons to blackmail Zelensky, there was never actually any evidence for it. But what it did do was promote this Cold War narrative that we should be fighting this war with Russia. Adam Schiff on the House floor, when he was leading the impeachment, said that we aid Ukraine so that we can fight Russia over there. We don't have to fight Russia here. And I remember thinking, is this what being a left-winger is now? We have to support fighting a proxy war with Russia? And look where it got us. It got us into this all-out hot war over the last few years. So that's one of many reasons why I thought Russiagate was a huge scam and a big danger.
And it's weird how all of these, like, I don't know how to describe it, these weird authoritarian things align with what is described as the left today. And if you are somebody who holds left economic views but criticizes the war machine or like Adam Schiff's statements and how they've gone after Trump, you are now right wing, you are far right. They'll call you far right for simply being like, well, Trump didn't do that. Ah, we got you.
Yeah, they'll call you a Russian asset, and they will look the other way or cheer on people being censored in the name of cracking down on so-called disinformation. So look at, for example, the reporting on the Hunter Biden laptop before the election. They rolled out the Russiagate playbook because some embarrassing emails from Hunter Biden's laptop emerged. And rather than let people look at the contents of the laptop and make up their own minds, they censored it in the name of fighting Russia, which was, of course, another complete scam. So that entrenched that playbook. But I don't think it's exclusive to the left. Now, because of this conflict in Gaza, you're seeing plenty of Republican politicians calling for censoring voices that support Palestinian rights. You're seeing people called anti-Semites unfairly. You're seeing college groups being shut down, like at Columbia, two groups just got shut down for their Palestinian advocacy. So I do think on both sides you have this. Certainly during the Russiagate era, it was happening a lot on the liberal side, and people like me were the target of it.
This is a crazy thing. The Israel-Palestine issue has ripped both the left and the right in half in this really weird way.
It's pretty wild.
And I think it's I don't necessarily know how this position starts, but there are these funny comics. Stone Toss is a comic where it's like a communist with like a Gilded Age oligarch, and they're both pulling the rope together, and there's a libertarian and a fascist pulling the rope together. Like, what is this? Like, what is this political debate that we're having? And so what you end up with is somehow, several years ago, people who were right-leaning or conservative in their values were moving towards pro-free speech. People who are disaffected liberals or former Democrats are now agreeing with Trump supporters. Trump was moderate. Even Steve Bannon says he's a moderate in our movement. No. Vox.com called Trump a moderate back in 2015. Yeah. And so these, like, you look at Trump's bump stock ban. He is not this far right, anarchist or libertarian or anything like these things. So what's interesting is that as long as Israel wasn't in the debate, so Protective Edge happens, 2014, and then after that, you get this period where there are people who are very critical of Israel and people who are very supportive of Israel. But as long as they're not talking about it, they're all working together. And the same is true for pro-Gaza or critical of Hamas, or pro-Palestine, I should say, and critical of Hamas. You've got now Hassan Piker and Ethan Klein in this fight over this. Let me pull this one up, and we'll actually talk about it because this exemplifies things very, very well. We have this clip. It was posted on Twitter. It's got 500,000 views. Lofty Pixel says Ethan breaks down on stream after withstanding an unending barrage of 30,000 cultists in Hassan's chat spamming Hamas are resistance fighters and From the River to the Sea and Zionist Pig perpetually for 3 straight hours. Let me play this clip for you guys.
Sounds just like their Discord, actually.
Man. And you know I'm not a fucking radical Jew. I'm not even a religious Jew.
No, I know.
I have no stake in the game. And this is coming from...
Yeah, it's still playing.
I know.
Ethan is now, he just gets up and leaves. So then we have another clip. There's a bunch of things that have been posted. This is the Quartering posted this 4 hours ago. Ethan Klein has epic meltdown after Hassan calls him stupid to his face. We'll play this briefly.
Saying Black Lives Matter doesn't insinuate that other lives don't matter. It's in the phrase, bro. I don't know what to tell you. From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free also doesn't feature from the river to the sea. We should destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. You're the one who's saying that is the secondary implication behind it.
Well, I think that...
And then, of course, we have this clip. This is from Too Lazy to Try, where he posts this clip. I couldn't find this one. I don't know where he got this clip from, but it's Ethan Klein basically breaking this down. I'll play a little bit of this so you can hear what he has to say.
Discord, and what I saw in that Discord was near universal praise for Hamas, near universal saying people deserved it, people near universally calling me a Zionist pig, mass murdering genocidal freak. And if you want to know the truth, that shit fucked me up seeing that Discord, because it made me realize that a lot of these people are watching this show, and it frankly disturbed me. Listen, everyone in my periphery, everyone in my circle, all the leftist people that I watch, that I'm part of, that watch this show, because I consider myself a part of that side, are all pretty much uncritically accepting of Hamas propaganda and uncaring about the rewriting of history right before our fucking eyes about this stuff. So I'm not seeing a lot of people, even though you might look at the popular media and say, everybody's supporting Israel.
This is the breakdown in pop culture and modern culture. So Ethan Klein, for those that are familiar, he's got H3H3. They've been big for a really, really long time. He's got millions of subscribers. He has a big show. Hassan Piker, of course, is the most prominent leftist streamer. They do a show together called Leftovers. And now they're feuding with each other over this one. We saw Amy Schumer posting articles from Campus Reform, which is a conservative-leaning publication. We are seeing mainstream celebrities being fired from their jobs for supporting Israel. It is the weirdest thing to see someone like, you know what, I just got to say this. Ethan Klein is married to, this is correct, Serge, an IDF veteran?
Yeah, everyone in Israel has to serve with the IDF. Right. Her name is Hila, yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously he's Jewish, he has connections to Israel. When he started working with these other leftists, look, man, how do you not know the views of the people you're working with? This is not new. The leftist protests going back as far as I know were in support of Palestine. We're very critical of Israel. Yep. I feel like too many of these celebrities just said, I'll do whatever's popular. And now it's blowing up in their faces because they ended up saying, wait, hold on, I can't support that. Not to mention, it's this really weird circumstance where you do have massive, massive popular support for Palestine, critical of Israel, but you have major corporations that aren't having none of it. A lot of these celebrities are concerned they're going to lose money, they're going to lose jobs, they're going to get fired if they're critical of Israel. But at the same time, if you're supporting Israel, you're getting fired too. So it's like double cancel culture going on.
Who's gotten fired for supporting
Tara
Israel?
Strong. Tara Strong.
Who's that?
She's a voice actress. She got fired without notification because she was posting a bunch of stuff on Twitter like, I stand with Israel, people were kidnapped and what Hamas is doing. And then they abruptly post saying, we'll no longer be working with her on the show. And she's like one of the most famous voice actresses
Okay.
in the world.
I haven't heard of that. My whole life, I've seen people getting canceled and smeared and fired for criticizing Israel. So, I mean, no one should be fired for their political views. I still think, though, the overwhelming trend is towards targeting people for being critical of Israel.
I do agree. And I think that's why a lot of these celebrities are just like, this is why you're seeing a lot of people on the left calling out Black Lives Matter now, because these leftist institutions, these activist organizations that are critical of Israel, pro-Palestine, are unabashedly coming out and saying like, nah, we're in support of this. And then it comes to an extreme degree where you have BLM Chicago posted the paraglider. You had several rallies in New York where the activists were actually cheering for Hamas explicitly. And I'm not saying Palestine. They were saying things like those hipsters, got kidnapped and taken. I'm sure they're doing fine, things like that. People are losing their jobs for that for sure. And now you've got those what was it? The Wall Street investors putting up a list of the people they will not hire.
Right. They were saying that there's certain universities they won't hire from. You have James Lindsay going out there saying don't hire college graduates, which is fascinating. I mean, he's saying that for all of his very specific James Lindsay reasons. Yeah. Not like the Israel thing. But you're seeing a lot of that. The thing in New York and the thing with celebrities, I think that a lot of it, they were fine to criticize Israel and support Palestinians because they simply didn't believe that an attack like this would happen. And so I think this was like a visceral reaction to this attack, which is like the worst one since the Holocaust, apparently. It's like worse than the Yom Kippur War. Go ahead.
When people say it's worse than the Holocaust, I'm like, okay.
Well, it's not worse than the Holocaust.
Sorry.
It's like the biggest day.
Since.
Yeah, that's what they
I'm
mean.
like, okay, but there's a dramatic,
huge difference.
Huge
6
difference.
million,
Huge difference.
1,400, 6 million.
Yeah, and so look, the issue here is the only thing that I care about is the zealotry. Is like you had one individual who I won't name calling for, I'll put it this way. She said the only reason not to nuke Gaza is because the fallout would affect Israelis. And I'm like, that's insane. And then you also have people like BLM Chicago posting the paraglider. And I'm like, y'all, people, chill.
What's interesting about the BLM Chicago thing is that was BLM grassroots. And BLM National was very quick to distance themselves from that group. Of course, they wouldn't have been last year.
Patrice Cullors has that famous line in 2015 where she said, we must end, what did she call it? End the...
I don't remember, but I remember seeing
end the project or whatever that is called Israel or something she called it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in New York, when you see activists pulling down American flags and putting up Palestinian flags and stuff, that's not a new sentiment in New York. That's I lived in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn for a long time, which is a very Arab neighborhood. I was often like the only white person basically at the grocery store. And that neighborhood had pro-Palestinian marches and stuff. Every couple of weeks, every month or so, you would walk outside and see these big gatherings of people essentially opposing Israel and being pro-Palestinian. And that's in a neighborhood that's very Arab, but it's also like got a lot of Jews in that neighborhood. So I wasn't that surprised to see that erupt I was surprised at how many people there were, but that is a long-standing sentiment coming out of Brooklyn for sure.
Putting aside the content of pro-Palestine expression, a lot of which I would totally defend, I still think there's a huge power disparity. We're talking about what some activists say or what some signs say. When it comes to the media, when it comes to Congress, Rashida Tlaib just got censured for endorsing the slogan "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which I think is a call for equality. We could debate that if you want, but regardless, meanwhile, you have people on the other side. Brian Mast, a member of Congress, he's a Republican. He said that there's no distinction between civilians and Hamas inside Gaza. Lindsey Graham said we should level the place, referring to Gaza.
Lindsey Graham called for bombing Iran.
He's the worst guy in the Senate.
So you have people calling for mass murder inside Gaza and openly endorsing state terrorism, saying there's no distinction between civilians and Hamas. They don't get censured. Rashida Tlaib, the one Palestinian American member of Congress, does. That's the power imbalance that I think speaks to what's going on.
What does that mean that she was censured? What happened exactly?
It's a formal resolution. You censure someone, you're basically reprimanding them for speaking out of.
Is it like if they do it again, they get fired or something?
Well, it entirely depends on the speaker. It depends on party leadership.
So it's like a warning. It's like an official warning or something.
It's like it's a demerit. It's like we here besmirch your honor, haha, and they.
But they don't lose anything. It's just like
losing would have to come from an official action by like the speaker or party member officials. So censure is mostly just like we hereby declare that you have done a bad thing.
Yes, we have agreed you have done wrong.
However, there is when Marjorie Taylor Greene got stripped from all her committees and she got booted. So power disparity really just depends on the subject matter. So I know you're specifically referring to the Israel-Palestine and not necessarily any other subject matters. I think the issue with this is, I got to be honest, man, these are the rules that Rashida Tlaib wants to live by. I have absolutely no problem with her being censured. First of all, it doesn't really do anything. It may be bad for her in the long run because clearly other members of Congress don't like her if they're willing to censure her. But my attitude when it comes to free speech has changed a bit from, I think it was very naive 10 years ago to say something like, we must defend the free speech even for those who disagree with us, to where I'm now at, I'll defend the free speech for anybody who defends free speech. Anybody who opposes free speech will get no defense from me. So if Rashida Tlaib and the people she works with are fine with censorship of other people, I will not be rushing to her defense.
Okay, that's a fair point because you want moral consistency, but I'll defend anyone's free speech. So as someone who does support that, I think it's fair to oppose her being censored, especially if we're trying to be consistent. People saying
it's not moral consistency.
Well,
it is if we allow people who oppose free speech to, like, if there are two forces and one side says, I will give you leeway, and the other side says, I will not give you leeway, then over a long enough period of time, the compromising party will lose. And this is actually the argument made by the left. They show that Karl Popper meme all the time about tolerating intolerance. I think that's a little dry, but if I simplify it, it's if Rashida Tlaib says we must defend free speech, defended free speech on campus, denounced the violent riots and the attacks on people for various opinions, I'd be right now saying, like, we must defend Rashida Tlaib because we disagree. So, for instance, like Cassandra McDonald, who's a good friend of mine, very critical of Israel, and she's adamantly pro-free speech. And so I'm just like, I will absolutely defend.
Oh, I got it. But how do you know that Rashida Tlaib is not pro-free speech?
So
because I know of her also defending the rights of Julian Assange. That to me is a free speech stance. So
that's good.
I haven't seen any evidence that she's anti-free speech, except for that she's a Democrat, which I understand. It's fair enough in these times to assume if someone's like a congressional Democrat, they might have some anti-free speech views. I think that's a fair assumption. But in the case of Rashida Tlaib, I can't think of any evidence offhand that she's anti-free speech. I mean, have you? What have you seen from her?
Just going back of the past several years relating to various actions that have taken place in and around Congress and various stances and defenses from Congress pertaining to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene versus Ilhan Omar, it is free speech when it's something I care about, and if I don't care, I'm not involved.
Right. Okay.
But to be fair, it would be prudent of me to, before saying something like that, have like a list of examples. But my point isn't necessarily to single out Rashida Tlaib over this, because I don't think she's like she's like the epitome of a guilty party when it comes to not being in support of free speech. I agree with the Julian Assange stuff. And Rashida Tlaib has had several victories in the past, things that I agree with her on as well. I'm just more so, censorship is not that big of a deal, but I agree with you on the power disparity for sure when it comes to Israel, and mostly because the military-industrial complex and the lobbyists in this country absolutely want conflict, war, contracts, etc. Lindsey Graham exemplifies it better than anything else when he says we should bomb Iran with or without evidence. What's going on in Israel, I don't think, we were asking, I forgot what we asked on the show about it. Do you think it's religious? Because there are some people who are deeply religious, and there's podcasts that have come out where they say things like, this could be the second, or depending on your religion, the first coming of the Messiah. And so, and I know it sounds crazy, and there's a lot of people who don't believe this stuff, but there are very serious, prominent Christians and Jews who believe this may be the Messianic era, the red heifer, etc.
I get so pissed about that, because for the Israelis to claim it's a Jewish thing is putting all the Jewish people's lives at risk across the earth. But it is an Israeli thing.
But my point was, we asked, is it religious? No. At the highest levels, it's mostly just military expansion, oil, energy, etc. The U.S. has desperately wanted to go to war with Iran. Having military assets and control in Israel is massively, massively beneficial to the U.S. military interests in the region. It was very difficult to invade Iraq. It was very difficult to invade Afghanistan. We struggled and failed in both these countries, but in Israel, the United States has a very powerful military foothold. Not the same as, I'm not saying they have massive military bases the same as, Afghanistan. I mean, like, they don't need it when we are sending weapons and missiles and funding and things like that.
I totally agree that the U.S. interest is geopolitical, and Israel's been a client state of the U.S. since 1967, when it showed that it could smash Arab nationalism. And after that, Israel became very favored by the U.S. bipartisan establishment. Now, though, you do have this phenomenon of these extremists or of these, evangelical Christians who are a major base of support for Israel. That is important, especially in some congressional races. And you also have a pro-Israel lobby too, AIPAC, which also can influence congressional races with their sway. But the interest has always been the same. It's just because also Israel's gone so much to the right and has become, the face of it has become so clear. A lot of its former supporters have turned away from it because it's not as easy as it used to be. I mean, I'm Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish community. It used to be hard for people like me to hold the views which are critical of Israel. Now, in my circles, nobody defends Israel anymore. So hence they've had to find other bases of support, which is in the evangelical Christian community.
I find with like the left and the right spreading out, but also now shattering and like kind of almost like you see this, what's happening is if think of the left and the right on a globe and it's all around the equator, but it's twisting up. Like when tensions get high, people become authoritarian. That's going up, and then libertarian would be going down. So you go far to the left, but you're also twisting up, becoming more an authoritarian leftist, which is like fight, do the thing, the river to the sea, or you're going to the right and getting twisted up into an authoritarian rightist. Smash them all, the nuclear weapons in Gaza, and like, or you see the people's true colors come out in times of tension if they become more libertarian. Like, we should not be committing more arms to this to escalate it again. And then there's some people that you see the whole globe and they're like, well, we're in a military, we're basically controlling Earth's military right now, and Israel's a big part of that. If we let it go, that's going to be a big loss to the American military industrial.
Let me tell you what's really fascinating to me is Ron DeSantis. He orders the dissolution of these student groups that state in their like documents or whatever that they are not in support of the movement. They are the movement. Ron says they're asserting that they're Hamas, that they are not just activists. And many of these people involved.
Did they say we support the Hamas movement or just the resistance movement in general?
They said the documents, I want to be careful because it did not say explicitly we are Hamas. It said the people who engaged in these fights are freedom fighters, and we are part of that movement as Palestinians in exile.
Okay, so they're saying that they support resistance.
But I mean,
was that the Student Voices for Palestine?
It was whatever Ron banned.
Okay.
Ron's argument was, if you are claiming to be a part of this movement, this group, then you can't be a student group because that violates the law. Okay, you can't be actively trying to support a terrorist organization. You're gone. What was interesting is Vivek Ramaswamy came out and said, no way. These are students engaged in free speech. I actually talked to him, Vivek, very briefly, and I was like, yeah, but did you read it? They said they're not support of the movement. They are the movement. And he said, students saying stupid things is not the same thing as supplying terrorist organizations or providing material support. Ron should not be shutting these people down. And then actually on the debate stage said the same thing. I have tremendous respect for that because Vivek was not just easily swayed by this argument. Many people on the right who are in support of Israel were saying like, oh yeah, but look, they say they are, they're effectively saying they are Hamas. Because that's actually my first instinct was don't ban the group. Oh wait, they're saying they're Hamas. Okay, well now it's getting interesting. Then Vivek pushes back and says, no way, free speech. So I think it's interesting. I think it's troublesome that we are definitely seeing there are many people who are pro-Israel that would be on the right that are not for free speech. And I think we have to be careful of, I certainly think it's more so on the left than the right, but opportunists who would claim to be for free speech and then at a moment's notice try and ban the speech of someone who speaks. They become
authoritarian, man, and you see it in the heat of the moment. I don't want to put, I really don't want to put Shapiro on blast. Ben, I love you. Return my phone calls. I'll stop putting you on blast. No, I haven't actually called him yet. But like, it shocked me how quickly he was screaming about annihilating a bunch of humans after fear can do that to somebody, And if he was, when you're the military commander, you don't have time to think.
What do you mean by that?
He came out pretty early on, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was very much like, we need a swift, strong counteroffensive, and we need to put this to bed, basically saying
Ben's been pretty adamant that the killing of civilians is a tragedy. The difference between him and the typical left is that he's in support of Israel's military actions, which is resulting in a lot of civilian dead. His argument, and I don't mean to argue for him, he can speak for himself, but his argument is more so that there's a difference between Hamas flying over and targeting people at a music festival and Israel targeting military leaders and killing civilians in the process. However, he has also said the killing of any civilian is a tragedy. The Daily Jeremy Boring also said the death of any Palestinian civilian, woman or child, as well as Israeli, are tragedies in an equal sense. So I'm not trying to defend what Ben is saying. I'm trying to clarify his position.
Yeah, and also
he's not saying just go around killing
people. It was the
people.
way he came out and said it. I guess it was the day of or the day after the attack, October 8th, or was it the 9th, when he spoke out publicly about it. Like I didn't see him talking about like, well, what happened? Why did the attack happen for 6 hours? Why was there no IDF response in 6 hours of this just raping and pillaging that these Hamas members were doing? Why was there no defense? I didn't hear any of that from Ben. It was just very much like, we need to go in. They've done it to us. Now get them. And it was like, that was a quick twist to authoritarian. And if he had his finger on the button, that's a temper I don't like.
My view would be a very simple: if someone attacks you, stop them, bring them to justice. However, I can see the arguments that are happening now are much, much, much different, right? Your video, you're talking about ceasefire. I think the amount of destruction that's happening in Gaza is exceeding what I would describe as proportional.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm trying to keep it very, very, very plain, if you can tell.
Yeah. The axiomatic line you have to say if you support Israel is that Israel has the right to defend itself. And in the abstract, yeah, of course, someone has the right to defend themselves. But what do we mean by that defense? So if this is October 7th and they're being attacked by Hamas, absolutely, you have the right to defend yourself. But this isn't October 7th anymore. Now this is a month-long operation, a carpet bombing of Gaza. As we're speaking, more than 11,000 killed, more than 4,600 children.
I got to push back on carpet bombing.
Yeah. Technically, I think it's not technical carpet bombing because it's targeting specific areas, and then there's just collateral damage. Okay. Carpet bombing would be targeting swaths of an area.
It's massive bombing of a densely populated area.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Massive, absolutely.
And what's missing from this discussion is an acknowledgement that before October 7th, things weren't all peachy. Israel's been occupying Gaza and the West Bank for decades, since 1967. And what is Gaza? The majority of it is refugees and their descendants, people who were expelled, ethnically cleansed by Israel in 1948. And a country that is occupying someone else doesn't have the right to defend itself in order to perpetuate that occupation. If they're being attacked on October 7th, I understand you defend your people. But after that, Israel's only obligation is to end the occupation. They don't have the right to bomb people because they live in an area where some militants fought back.
Well, the first thing I would say is I typically am just at a loss for words in terms of the moral arguments between two political bodies that are not the United States and that have like nothing to do with me and what I want or my taxpayer dollars.
And where we don't really speak those languages. It's like
I'm like, people are like,
well, we're paying for it though. We're giving the weaponry.
So, right. So my issue is like, you got to justify why we're doing that and why we spend our tax dollars, why everyone in this country is working so hard dealing with stagnant wages and high cost of goods. And then someone's going to come and say, we're going to give Israel whatever they want. I'm like, listen, I certainly don't want Israel to be destroyed. I don't want Jews to be targeted and killed. I don't want Palestinians dying. But there's a war over there. So I'm just like, the moral arguments, well, Israel was there and they were doing this. I'm like, look, man, it means nothing to me. Right? So if an argument was, hey, you're an American, you pay taxes. Do you have a good answer for why it is a large portion of your savings are diluted through this policy of just mass spending, deficit spending, and giving foreign countries military aid? It's like, I don't really know. Then maybe we shouldn't do that.
I know why it is for Israel.
But if the argument is
it's a colony.
Israel is morally bad for these reasons, but wait, what about the Palestinians, Hamas? They did these things and the people in Gaza support. I'm like, well, that's a debate for the people who are at war with each other and not for the United States. How about that?
It's interesting, though. I mean, I was reading an article in the Washington Post today about the pre-planning of the attack on October 7th. And apparently it was like years in the making. And there were
2 years.
Yeah, it was like 2 years in the making. And there was, I mean, it's sort of fascinating, the planning, because the intentions, according to this article, were to go for the attackers to get all the way to the West Bank. That was part of their goal. And also to sort of show some defiance to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And also they had two books, two sets of books. They had like the two sets of communication. They had the communication with each other and the communication that they knew Israel was listening to. So it was very organized. But just to go back to what we were talking about with the Students for Justice in Palestine, that is a national movement. They have chapters on campuses all over the country, and they're not a not-for-profit, and the national organization is not a not-for-profit. But they are umbrellaed by an organization called the Westpac Foundation in Westchester. So they are able to take tax-deductible contributions. And when those students are saying that they are the movement, it's not a grassroots. Students for Justice in Palestine is not a grassroots organization.
They said Palestinians in exile. Like,
right.
They're saying they're actual Palestinians who are in support of...
Sure, I think they're probably accurate with that. And that student group, as well as Jewish Voices for Peace, was also banned on the Columbia University and Barnard campuses.
Really? What?
Yeah. They staged staged a whole, they staged like a, what was it? It was like a national strike on Thursday. And there was some upsetness on the campus, and there were some sit-ins. So those groups were banned on the Columbia campus as well.
I'm like...
But it is part of like a national organization. So it isn't just like banning, it isn't just saying like, hey, you formed this student group and you got funds from the Student Action Committee or whatever. It is part of a national, very organized group that has funding that we can't track because they have an umbrella group and they are basically an NGO.
Oh,
I
ban
just
corporations from...
I'm not advocating for or against. I'm just giving
in terms
information.
of war, I do not believe that morality is determined based on the strength of a single party. So we'll get as specific as we can. Israel-Palestine. Israel is not wrong because they're more powerful than Palestine. Israel wins a conflict, and that doesn't mean they're morally right or wrong. Two different groups of people are fighting for a variety of reasons, and they believe they're right and they're justified. Many people would agree with one side or the other, and they'll make those arguments here in the United States and then fight about it. My view is kind of like, don't know why I'm paying for it. And just because Israel is more powerful doesn't mean they're inherently bad. If two groups are fighting, I don't know what you want me to, what you want to do about it. There's really interesting conundrums as it pertains to how you deal with these things. Let me give you a scenario and ask, like, it's not, there's no good way to do a 1-for-1 analogy, but here, an example would be, there is a mass shooter in a mall unloading an AR-15 at a bunch of different storefronts, and he's hitting several people. A man runs up, aims his weapon at the shooter to stop him, but he's standing in front of a crowd of people. Is the answer, do not shoot at him because you will also hit the people behind him.
Jeez.
I'm not saying I know what is right or wrong. I'm saying if the issue is...
It's the trolley problem too.
But the analogy to me is flawed because Hamas right now is not a threat en masse the people of Israel. And also, again, before October 7th, Israel was occupying Gaza. So if, for example...
What does that mean, occupying?
They had it besieged. They had completely cut it off from the world. You couldn't, if you're in Gaza, you're stuck there for life. You can't leave. Israel controls everything you do.
What about Egypt?
Well, they had
Egypt also was participating in the blockade.
Right, so it's not just Israel, it's Egypt too.
But it's under Israeli control. Israel has a list of everybody there. Israel even calculated the amount of calories that people could eat without fully starving.
But they were also allowing all the money from Qatar to go in, like $30 million.
Netanyahu was allowing Qatar to pop up Hamas because he saw Hamas as a way to undermine international calls for a two-state solution. Because even though Hamas in recent years has actually tried to moderate its position and say they accept a Palestinian state in the occupied territories, Netanyahu rightly saw their internal divisions and the divisions inside the Palestinian factions as a way to undermine calls for a two-state solution. So yes, Netanyahu, and he said this at a meeting, it was quoted, he said the way to stop a Palestinian state is to prop up Hamas.
That's been recognized for a long time. To specify, the Hamas leaders, according to this article I read today, I don't have a ton of information on this, but the Hamas leaders were saying that they were advocating, they were saying like, oh, we're comfortable with peace, we're happy with the situation as it is. As they were planning the attack, it was like a diversion tactic.
Listen, I think there's a split inside Hamas, and I think, from what I understand, and a lot of the details of October 7th are still murky. We don't know exactly, I think, the proportion of people, for example, who were killed on the Israeli side who were military. I don't deny there were civilians killed in horrible atrocities. But we also don't know how many people were killed by Israeli fire, because we know that Israeli helicopters fired on some of those areas where the Hamas people were inside the Israeli kibbutzim. And some of those people were burned alive. And I don't think Hamas rockets could cause that. I could be wrong. But what I'm saying is there's a lot we don't know about October 7th. We do know there were atrocities by Hamas. That is clear. But a lot of the details are still unclear. And also what the goals were of this operation. And there's a split inside Hamas. There are people inside Hamas who didn't even know about this, and there are people inside Hamas who,
well, the political leaders, right?
there are people inside Hamas who advocated accepting a Palestinian state within the West Bank and Gaza. Other people rejected that. So I think it's hard to describe the movement as a monolith.
The question would be, who started the fight?
Well, I think the fight was started by Israel in 1948 when it was founded on ethnic cleansing.
Well, that's the war.
Well, okay, so this round of the fight, you could say, yes, Hamas did, but again, these are not two equal sides. One side is...
What does equality matter in war?
Well, because if you're apportioning blame, and you have one side that's occupying another, that's preventing people from living normal lives.
Egypt?
Egypt was participating in the blockade.
Right, but
Israel,
Egypt
the
could
occupying,
open up the Rafah crossing and say, everyone, you're free to come.
They could let everyone flee, but then that's a dilemma because then you're basically accepting Israel's ethnic cleansing goals. Israel wants to drive all those people out, which it's doing now. And so Egypt, yes, Egypt was totally complicit.
So both Egypt and Israel are at odds with each other, and the Gazans are caught in the middle?
Yes, but again, Israel's the occupying power. Israel controls everything that gets into Gaza, the fuel,
even the Rafah
medical
crossing.
supplies.
Like Israel won't allow Egypt to allow things in?
Egypt being a U.S. client state, which gets a lot of money from the U.S. and doesn't want to do anything to defy the U.S., basically obeyed orders. And so, yes, Egypt has plenty of complicity. I've no kind things to say about them. But Israel is the power that displaced all these people in Gaza to begin with, has occupied them, has besieged them, has routinely attacked them. This is not the first Israeli attack on Gaza. There's been many. And all this has been done with the goal of solidifying Israeli settler colonialism, which goes back to Israel's founding. So in terms of who started the fight, I think it starts with Israel, and it's their obligation to end it.
You said 1948.
Yeah.
What started that fight?
Well, then you have a Zionist movement recognizing that there are people inside the land of Palestine which they want to colonize. Jabotinsky, who was an early Zionist leader, said Zionism is a colonizing project. Lord Balfour, who was the British official who promised a Jewish homeland in Palestine, said...
With that letter.
With that letter, he said, we're going to, I'm paraphrasing him, he said, we're going to go ahead with this because even though, yes, this isn't a inconvenience or it's a hindrance to the Arabs who live there, but the Zionist project is more important. And so when you deny people the right to nationhood in their own land, there's going to be a problem. And Israel accomplished that with ethnic cleansing. That's not a dispute now. And then in 1967, Israel then brings millions of more people under occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. And ever since then, it's been this current phase of outright military occupation. And yes, Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, but really that was just the occupation, just in a different guise.
So my view on this is the fight didn't start in 1948, right?
Okay.
I mean, the fight just goes back ad infinitum to the dawn of time, basically to the years of biblical legend.
It goes before that.
It goes well before that.
Before the kingdom of Judah even existed, there were the Canaanites.
My thing is just like
according to the Bible. According to the Bible.
No. Not according to the Bible.
According to genetic history, 90,000 years there have been hominids living there. 90,000 years.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the Bible.
Cool.
I'm talking about the fact that Jews lived there.
Yeah.
Thousands of years ago. At
the start of the 20th century, there was, I don't know, the number of, the percentage of Jews in Palestine, I think was maybe 5%, maybe even less than that. And then you had, and I understand this because I know my history of Jewish people, a lot of persecution. And that increased support for this idea of a Jewish homeland, which certainly ramped up with the Nazi Holocaust. So you had a huge migration in the 20th century of Jews to Palestine. But before that, though, you had times when Jews and Palestinians were living in relative peace. And the conflict only comes with the Zionist project, with this attempt to colonize Palestine.
I heard that when Arthur Balfour signed the Balfour Declaration during World War I and basically screwed the Arabs out of Palestine, they were like, hey, Arabs, betray the Ottomans and we'll give you that land. The Arabs were like, okay, they betrayed the Ottomans. The British won the war. And then the British were like, psych, we're keeping it for ourselves. That is what led to the Germans hating the Jewish people leading up to World War II. So created all this. They were like, they stole it. The Zion, they created a land of Israel, like with these Jewish. So that's where all this German hate came from.
They were hating.
It's just something I heard recently and it made total sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
but what a screw over. They lost World War I because it was the land with.
There were pogroms in the Middle Ages.
It's been going on for thousands of years.
Way even before. I mean,
but the modern German sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, there was all this stuff also in the Middle Ages. Jews in Europe, for the most part, were not allowed to own property. And so that's why you have that's why you ended up with a history of Jews involved in banking and lending. Right. It's because they weren't allowed to own property. So they had to find some other way to make an income.
I'm just thinking what's the solution?
Well, listen, for me, ideally, it would be equality for everybody because I don't believe in the supremacy of any ethnicity. Even though there's a big history of persecution of Jews.
Let me ask you a question.
So that's my ideal. But the international consensus has long been a two-state solution.
And so that would be like the West Bank and Gaza being connected by that little travel corridor or something.
Yeah, and remove all the Israeli settlements. Why should somebody from
settlements where?
In the occupied West Bank. Why should somebody from Brooklyn have more rights than the people who've lived there forever?
They took all the settlements out of Gaza. I mean, they evicted.
Yes, they did, and they put Gaza under a medieval blockade. And in fact,
what I'm saying is they took all the settlements out.
Yes, they did.
Right. But none of that means anything because right now there are people who live in houses and they're not party to what you're describing. Someone maybe like moved in later and got a house and they live somewhere. The kibbutzes in Israel that got attacked. Some of these people are just like, I bought a house. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what would happen? Do you think if the barriers around Gaza were completely removed and Israel said all people of Gaza are free to move about the state of Israel?
Well, if Israel did that and they finally took responsibility.
I'm saying, what happened if they just moved the barricades and said, everyone, you're free to move as you please?
Well, at this point now, people are so destitute, they'd be looking for water and food. So after you sorted that out and people actually got their basic needs, which Israel is depriving them of. Look, I've been to Gaza. I've been to the West Bank. People just want to live in peace and freedom.
Would the people go back to the land they believe belongs to them and their ancestors?
Unless Israel tried to have a just resolution to that, which also is the international consensus. Palestinians have the right to return. They were removed. Now, you could argue now that's no longer feasible. It's true. I'm not giving up my home now to an indigenous person, even though an indigenous person lived there, I'm sure, before and were ethnically cleansed a long time ago. So we recognize that historical injustices happen, and you have to find a way to address it in a fair way. But the problem is Israel's never accepted responsibility.
But it doesn't matter because you can't.
Well, you can at least accept responsibility for the ethnic cleansing. Here now, we acknowledge that this land was created on stolen indigenous land. Israel could do the same thing.
We don't acknowledge that.
I don't acknowledge that at all.
Yeah,
okay. Well,
everywhere.
No chance.
No chance.
I do for what it's worth, and many
they
people
bought Manhattan. Manhattan was paid for legally.
Okay, let's not debate that. The point is, if you accept the historical truth that there was ethnic cleansing in 1948,
but people don't. They're just
okay. Well, then you can go to the Israeli archives and read all about it. Benny Morris, who's the top Israeli historian who supports this project, says it was a good thing. Says that it didn't go far enough. His term is ethnic purification.
But none of that matters.
Well, it does matter because if Israel took responsibility for it finally and said, we stole your homes, we're sorry for it. Now we have a problem where we have all these people here. We built up a state. We're not going to let everyone come back, but we will compensate for you and apologize. That could be a starting point.
That does not solve the problem.
It could. Well, so the alternative is what? Permanent occupation.
I'm not saying I have a solution. I'm saying
this is what I'm proposing is take responsibility, apologize, and remove all the settlements from the West Bank.
And so that means there are people who are there who have no idea. Like
yes,
they got a house and they moved in. And they were like, "Wow, we're moving into a house," and now it's like the government's going to come and take their land from them.
Yes,
and then you know what they're going to do? They're going to say, "My land was taken from me by the government in some ridiculous deal that I don't agree with," and then they're going to start.
Except there's something.
So there we go.
Under international law, you cannot build up territory you've acquired by force. It's a pretty basic
But is
premise.
the government doing it?
The Israeli government.
And so a civilian who gets a house.
Yes.
What happens to them and their property and their net worth and their... I am not saying what's happening there is good.
Put them back in 1948 Israel, which again...
Doesn't matter. That means nothing.
Well, Israel
You can't go back and say, well, back then someone did something. I'm saying right now...
Israel has recognized international boundaries.
Right
nobody
now.
Nobody recognizes...
talking about the geography of what it was in 48.
But that doesn't mean anything.
Nobody recognizes Israel.
You're not going to take someone's house from them. It's not going to work. You're going to get bloodshed.
Well, first of all, Israel takes Palestinians' homes all the time.
And it's bad and it's bloodshed.
Yeah, all the time.
And so
it does
right
it by
now,
massacring them.
if the argument is equality for all and everyone can return, okay, then what's going to happen is...
That wasn't my argument.
You said...
I mean, ideally I said it should be equality for all because I believe all people are created equal. So why wouldn't I support that? But it's not practical. I agree with that. Because
the implication is the right of return.
Yes.
That there's land now where Israelis live.
Yes.
And the Palestinians would get to return to that land, displacing the people who live there.
I'm saying you recognize the right, and you now just because you recognize a right, that doesn't mean you fully implement everything that comes with it. And you at least though you have to. If there's a historical injustice and it's still causing so much justice.
Okay, but listen,
you have to at least recognize it.
And right, and so if Israel came out and said, "Yes, we stole your land.
Yes,
we occupied you, and we're not going to give it back," you think
Yes.
that's gonna be like, "Well, we're cool. Thank you very much, and have a nice day."
Well, listen, I understand why Palestine would never accept that because their land was stolen from them. If you meet so many Palestinians, still have the keys to their homes. I'm trying to think of a practical solution to this horrible problem. And ideally, I think everyone should have the right to come back to their homes because I do believe in equality. If we accept, though, that Israel has these recognized boundaries and Israel has nuclear weapons, and so the idea of getting them to accept equality is pretty impractical, then at least at minimum, the very minimum we should do is recognize the historical injustice that's happened to Palestinians and then work within that to find a solution. And to me, it's based on international law. These settlements have no right to be there. Remove all of them.
But what right? What does that mean?
So
you can't build up your population in territory you've stolen.
So are
But that's the history of the
Jews are
world.
not indigenous to the Middle East?
I know there's been a small Jewish population in the Middle East for a long time, but like, do I look like I come from the Middle East? I mean, you meet many Jews. They're from Ukraine. They're from Eastern Europe. Like this idea that like
how far back do we go to restore?
If someone came to your house holding up a Bible and saying, "Hey, my family lived here 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago," does that give you a right? But does that give them a right to come and take your home? Because that's basically like the Zionist.
So
argument.
what is the time frame then? 50 years?
Yeah, I mean, we're in this modern era of the United Nations. Israel was recognized by the UN within certain borders, not within the West Bank and Gaza.
So if you give it 50 years, then if it's 50 years, then give it 50 years, and then there'll be total peace.
You're right.
Well,
okay, so I agree. Let's say in 50 years we'll just call the land, and we're done.
And then it's peaceful.
Okay,
and everyone's happy.
You're asking me for solutions right now.
Right. The issue is, I think
what I'm proposing is a historic compromise, and I'm not sure Palestinians would even accept it because their land is all of Palestine. They were there. They were ethnically cleansed. We're asking them to accept 22% of historic Palestine. And Israel, with U.S. backing, are such fanatics they couldn't even give Palestinians that. All these claims that Palestinians have been offered a generous peace deal of the state, it's all a lie. Israel's never been willing to give up control of the major West Bank settlements. That's the problem here.
What do you think about Burma?
What do you think about Burma?
Yeah.
I don't have strong opinions about Burma.
Why do you think? How about Azerbaijan and Armenia?
That's a fascinating situation.
I think that was a horrible thing that happened. I'm also not as familiar with it as I am this issue.
I don't understand why people are just like Israel. 110%, everything about it all the time. And I'm just like, bro, I'm sitting here in America, like, I don't know why we're involved.
It's because the U.S. is funding it.
But U.S. provides funding to Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Tim, did you know this?
Israel, dude.
Insurgencies have been going on in Myanmar since 1948.
And there's several 100,000 dead since then.
Yes.
And this year alone, I think
that.
it's been twice.
Can you think
there's communist
Is there one
insurgencies?
U.S. politician or corporate media pundit who goes on TV and
No, I agree. That's the point. The point is like, why?
Yeah.
Why is it Israel?
Because we're responsible for it, and because the injustice.
I bet you
is
could
so,
figure out a way
stark.
that we're responsible for Myanmar too.
I'm sure you could.
that we had our hands in there somewhere.
All I'm saying is like we need to get back to America first, and I'm
Totally
sure
agree.
at the bare minimum, like there are many people who I see are like very critical of Israel, and I'm like, I don't know what that's all about, and I don't want to get into a moral argument. Should the U.S. stop funding everything outside of the United States and go back to securing its borders, building up jobs here, helping the working class, maybe fixing some of the pipes and the roads and infrastructure? We can agree because
that would be cool.
The people were like, stop funding Israel, and I'm like, stop funding everything?
But what about Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico, not a state, but should we stop funding them?
No, Puerto Rico's awesome.
Puerto Rico. So Israel's kind of like a client state of the U.S.
No, it's a territory. What do you mean?
Do you think that the?
I mean, it's technically a country, but it's used like a
It's a
client
territory
state.
of the United States. They're American citizens. They have
Puerto
American.
Rico is. Puerto Rico.
I've said Israel. Israel is.
Should Puerto Rico
client
become a
state.
state?
No.
That's
How
not what
come?
I mean.
Maybe. But
I'm just saying we
they
can't.
vote on that every now and then.
Defunding
not
Israel
yet.
would be like
I don't think they
defunding
want to be
Puerto
states.
Rico.
I don't think so
because of
either.
taxes.
In the minds of the media and the people that are running the government, defunding Israel would be like defunding Puerto Rico. They use it like a client.
Well, I see what you're saying, but the thing about Puerto Rico is that the U.S. has a ton of territorial islands, and they're all not going to become states.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of complicated legal nonsense pertaining to the creation of a new state and whether Puerto Rico should become a state. And the big issue right now is I don't think the U.S. is actually able to solve its own regional problems with like Greater Idaho and Northern California. Yeah. So
that's a fascinating situation too. The Oregon counties that want to secede.
Bringing Puerto Rico in as a state would further destabilize an already tumultuous situation in the United States. So that's why I say maybe in the future, but for now. But let's do this. Let's shift into some domestic politics, and we'll get off yelling about Israel again.
I love domestic politics.
Here we go. Outrage as San Francisco boots vagrants off streets ahead of Xi Jinping visit, as California Governor Gavin Newsom admits woke city was only given polish to impress world leaders. Oh, we got the clip for you. I'm going to play it because it's hilarious. Here we go.
I know folks say, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true, because it's true.
That's what it takes, huh, Gavin?
But it's also true, for months and months and months prior to APEC, we've been having different conversations.
All right, so here's what I want to say. Imagine having a roommate. There's pizza boxes everywhere. The dishes are all dirty. There's grime everywhere. And you go, dude, I'm paying rent too. Clean up your mess. And they're like, I'll do it, man. Chill. And then one day the dude freaks out and is like, dude, my mom's coming over, and starts cleaning up. You'd be like, WTF, man.
You'd be so mad.
Like, I'm glad you're cleaning up.
infuriating.
I'm glad you're cleaning up, but you should have cleaned this place up a long time ago. And this proves you could have done it. I guess the difference in the analogy is, the argument is, oh, it's so hard to deal with, and how do we help these people? And then what do? They put a bunch of like horse troughs along the street to block tents.
Did they go in at 4:30 in the morning with fire hoses and hit them all? Because they've done that before.
They did that in Atlanta before the Olympics. Remember, they like
sprayed people
cleared
down.
everybody.
There's video of it. You can
cleared
find
everybody out.
I mean,
before
it is
the Olympics.
full on fire
It was
hosing
crazy.
people's tents and destroying.
Yo,
In New York, a lot of times they just give people a bus ticket and they're like, "Get the hell out of here."
What's up with that fire, that homeless encampment?
That in L.A.
Yeah.
That fire. That
Those are
also
all the
like
time.
it was like a massive fire, and it also melted the freeway, and the freeway is now unusable.
Honestly, that's happened so many times. Remember during the pandemic, like I would literally be driving around LA and it'd be on the highway somewhere, or it'd be a fire underneath an overpass. It's like a regular thing that I saw many times.
I was driving out of DC last week with my son, and he was in the car, and he was just like, whoa, what's with all these tents? Why are there all these people just sleeping out here in the street? And I was like, that's our nation's capital, hon.
I got Aaron.
That's what we got going on.
You made
with so many people.
Earlier you mentioned like we're all created equal. You were talking about equality and like being there for all of us. But how do you deal with this excess of humanity that lives off of the tit, or just is like sick and they just live on the street? Like, what's your proposition?
I don't refer to unhoused people as the excess of humanity. The people who are excess of humanity, the people who are destroying this earth, the warmongers, the people who are using populations as sacrificial lambs and killing them, like Israel's doing, like what's happening in Ukraine. But basically, I connect this to foreign policy. Instead of spending all this money on arming Israel and also arming Ukraine, why can't we build homes for people who need them?
Well, I like that. Hold on, that's not a
Why
solution.
Why not?
I used to work for a homeless nonprofit. The first question you have to ask is, why is a person homeless? And it's typically not because they're poor. There's other underlying factors that result.
That's
in
what
them
I mean
being
by
poor.
the excess of humanity.
And
People
so-
that are gone broken.
But right. So the issue is, if you take a homeless person and put them in a house falls apart, house burns down, electrical problems, plumbing problems, maintenance, taxes, property taxes. You can't just make a house and put somebody in it.
Okay, so give them services too, like fund social services.
So
to
now
support
here's
people who need it.
And
Why
now
not?
here's where I'll agree with you. I would love to apply a wealth tax, but only to the military-industrial complex corporations. I would love to strip the wealth and tax at 100% all the warmongers, and take all of their money and literally, I would totally be okay with this, hand it out in cash to random homeless people.
But then they wouldn't be making profit.
I am saying I would rather a crazy homeless guy walking around just spitting, have $100,000 in cash stuffed in his pockets if it means the military-industrial complex is not funding and starting more needless nonsense wars and blowing.
We'd be way less in debt.
I'm bullish on the military-industrial complex these days.
Think about the economic boom of all the homeless people buying cheeseburgers and sub sandwiches. Subways would pop up everywhere.
So when I said excess of humanity, I just mean that I'm finding that some people have either gone totally psychotic due to drugs or like lack of connection with humanity, and they've just gone into wild feral mode. Like, what do we do? And they shit on the street. They don't want to get a job. They don't want to take a shower. They're looking for their next fix. They carry sharp blades on them. Like, what do we do about this?
Well, a lot of people would say also that those people who are, living rough, as you would say, or sleeping rough, that they should be allowed to do that they shouldn't have to be forced into society's way, right? Like, shouldn't there be a place where people who don't want to conform to society's standards can exist differently?
Okay, then what we do is
probably shouldn't be on the city streets.
We go to Wyoming and we take like 400 acres, and then we
you're
say,
just like, here.
After a certain amount of time of you being unhoused in this area, you will be given a structure in the middle of Wyoming, and best of luck to you.
That would be an interesting, weird Kafka-esque scenario. That would lead to like some serious, Shirley Jackson style novels coming out of there.
Sounds like gulags.
Sounds pretty weird.
I didn't say they were forced to stay
No,
there. I'm
you
saying
don't
we
have to
give you a
stay there.
house. What do
But,
you
like,
mean?
here's a bus ticket.
Here is a structure for which you can live, but it's in Wyoming. You can leave whenever you want.
There's an interesting thing too, like in you probably saw this in Chicago over the weekend. Some people who were in Chicago, illegal immigrants from Venezuela, they were like, "We don't like it here. It's cold and we can't get
They're
work."
going back,
right? And they're like, "We're going home." And in New York, they Mayor Adams turned Floyd Bennett Field basically into a tent city, and so some people were moved out of their shelters and they went to this tent city in Floyd Bennett Field, and they got off the bus and they were like, "We don't want to be out here. It's out like it's the old JFK airport, basically."
So let me ask you, Aaron. You said unhoused,
and they just want to go home.
What does that mean? Why do you say it that way?
That's the term now for homeless people.
But why?
That's the new politically correct term, Tim. Get with it.
No. But I'm asking because you used it.
I'm just doing what I'm told. That's the term, so you know.
Do you support?
But as somebody who has done advocacy for the homeless, I think it's offensive.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think what the left has done is try to sweep the problem under the rug, exemplified by exactly what the Democratic supermajority of Los Angeles does every single time the issue comes up. Not in my backyard. They all stand up and they scream. Look at San Francisco. Look at the problems of homelessness. And then what happens? Xi Jinping's showing up. Shove it all under the rug. Every policy I've seen. Did you know that there are more empty houses than there are homeless people? And I'm like, what are you saying? You want to just take a homeless person and put him in a house? You know what you're shoving the problem under the rug. You're saying we don't want these people to be seen in our streets. Stick them in a house somewhere. Well, now the naive might be like, no, we're giving them a house. Sure, but anybody who owns a house knows how difficult it is to maintain a house. Everybody knows. Well, not everybody agrees with property taxes, but property taxes exist for a reason, for supporting the roads and the community and the schools and things like this. The average homeless person is not homeless because they're like, I just lost my job and now I'm, in hard times. And if only I had an opportunity. Those people certainly exist. In what I encountered when it came to homeless people, having worked for various homeless nonprofits and advocacy nonprofits, is young people who choose to be homeless, but they want to be. There was a group in Seattle called the ERUPTS, train hoppers, people who are in their late teens, early 20s, who are intentionally homeless, and you would never get them into a house. And then we encountered like 80% of the homeless people are mentally unwell to the point where if you put them in a house and did not have a worker who was maintaining that house and caring for them, the house would probably burn down.
Yep.
But burn down or flood. They'd turn the stove on maybe, or they'd turn the water on. We had an issue where this is scary stuff for homeowners. Water was left on and the drain wasn't going down. And then after like 30 minutes, all of the ceiling of the basement, or I shouldn't say all, but like 30% destroyed just because the drain wasn't going down properly and it poured over the sink. I'm like, that's crazy. So we've dealt with all of this. Like, we put a homeless guy in a house. He turned the bathtub on. It overflowed. The house got flooded, destroyed everything. The house is unlivable. If he stays there, he'll die. Well, we lost that house. What do we do?
It's really, the whole house thing. Like, I've lived in apartments the whole time, and now I have a house. And recently, there's been like an issue here or there, and I'm like, damn it, I really wish I could call the super.
Wish there was a landlord
Wish I
who
could
would
call
run
the
it for you.
super in this building and be like, hey, this isn't working. You need to come up and fix this, blah, blah, blah.
Anyway, my point is, it was always really frustrating for me when I'm like, wow, we've raised X amount of dollars to help the homeless. What are we doing? Mental health programs. The shelters are actually not houses. They're like beds in community centers. It is so hard to get them to come. Why? No freedom. Can't do drugs. You can't drink. And some of these guys just can't think properly. There was one guy I remember encountering who had a bottle of wine he was trying to open. It was corked and I don't even know what he was doing. And then I was like, hey man, you all right? And he goes, baba. And I was like, there's nothing I can say to this man. And I don't want to get into it because you know what happens? He might get agitated. He might get angry. And then we got a situation. So I'm out. Yeah. I'm out.
There's definitely.
So what would you propose as a solution? I mean, you've worked with this community directly. So what would you support?
So any sheltering that we have to do, and this is the big challenge. The answer is always going to be a level of force, meaning if someone is a recurring homeless person living in an area, they are forcefully detained. They are taken from the area and said, you cannot live on the street. It is creating disease. We saw the emergence of typhus in California because of the expansion of the homeless population. It is a detriment to you. It is a detriment to us. And why do we stop people from doing certain drugs? Same argument. It's you're going to harm yourself and others. I'm actually in favor of most drugs being legal to varying degrees. So this is tough. And this is the serious and difficult position is, should the state arrest, and I don't mean like criminally arrest, I mean like restrict the movement of and forcefully detain a person who is persistently homeless. And if you want to solve the problem, that's what you have to do. What San Francisco does and many of these other places do is they'll load them up on buses and send them somewhere far away, and then just cross their fingers the problem doesn't come back. How did San Francisco deal with the homeless problem? Well, all I know is video 1 shows a bunch of tents. Video 2 shows a bunch of horse troughs full of water, blocking where the tents used to be, which likely indicates the government came by force, removed all the tents, kicked everybody out, destroyed everything, and then put up these horse troughs so Xi Jinping could come here in peace. I don't think that's good. All they're doing is saying F you to the homeless people. But if we made communal shelters where if you're persistently homeless, you will be brought, you can't leave, then we're talking about some kind of, it's going to require a due process system. It's going to require legislation. And unfortunately, either you remove these people forcefully and place them somewhere where they will be under better control, or you do what San Francisco did and just boot them out and then have them wander somewhere else.
Okay,
there's
here's my
something
proposal.
that you should have.
My proposal is this. Let's put all the effort that we put into warmongering, funding these proxy wars in Ukraine, funding Israel to bomb people of Gaza. Let's put all the money we put into that into a huge effort to give people shelter and give people the social services and support they need. Because as you say, a lot of people are dealing with serious mental illness issues, drug addiction, trauma. Let's try to address that first. And if that doesn't work, if after like we actually do like a war-like effort, like a huge effort, if that doesn't work, then okay. I think you have an argument for using some coercion.
I completely disagree. Because you don't go far enough. The warmongers should also be put up on stage and everyone gets to point and laugh at them as their wealth is taken from them.
What about
and then every
stocks?
warmonger,
Remember like the stocks in the Puritan New England? I think that there are definitely some things that should be done in order to prevent homelessness, even as difficult as it is to solve homelessness. Like there should be housing for kids that age out of foster care. Like you should get somewhere to live. If you're 18 and you're no longer in the foster care system. Look. Like those people, like if you come out of foster care, you're 18, you're not going to college, you have no money, you have no resources.
The real solution.
The city should help you get a house, like somewhere to live.
The real solution
so that you're not homeless.
It's a cultural issue. And I think the real problem is humans will not accept what this is going to become. That's just it.
You mean like
there is no acceptable moral position in the homelessness problem we are facing right now that any group would be okay with. That's just it. Forceful relocation and arrest of homeless is shocking and terrifies people. Because how do you enact that system? Well, there's a person gets arrested, accused of dereliction, and then they're brought before a judge to prove whether or not they're destitute, and then you don't have enough money, so now you're going to be locked up or something. That's terrifying and scary. Some people choose to be vagabonds and they're not the same as a person who's taking a dump on the sidewalk. But you're going to get arrested? It's a horrifying circumstance. The other thing is, with the degree of homelessness we've seen in LA and in San Francisco and Sacramento, it has gotten so bad with the human waste. Again, this is 5 years ago, the reemergence of typhoid and bubonic plague starting to emerge in California. And so what happens? You're going to get a Hunger Games or like Elysium style world where the ultra wealthy will build bridges between skyscrapers so they don't have to go onto the ground level where all of the feces and disgust is, or the government comes and sweeps everybody out, which, pick your poison, both are dystopian and horrifying.
What do you think about reopening the mental institutions? That's been talked about by the Republicans
Donald
during
Trump was
the debates.
talking about that, yeah.
You know, I don't know enough about that, but I do know that people definitely need support, and there has to be a humane way to do that. And the people who work on the ground are the best advocates for that and the best experts on that. I know plenty of people who work with the unhoused who have all kinds of ideas and talk about the needs that people have and how they're not being addressed because there just isn't the funding for it. So how about we try that first? How about we try to put some serious effort into this issue, treat it more seriously than we do treating the need to fight foreign wars and bomb people.
I got to stop on the unhoused thing, dude.
Do a real effort.
the unhoused thing is like, I think it's leftist doublespeak to manipulate public policy positions, because you don't like define house, right? So what we're saying is somebody who lives in some kind of structure, but it's not a house, so they're unhoused. What's a home, right? It's saying unhoused is applying a material position and like a resource number to what a person is required to have.
I'm personally not offended by the term homeless. I'm fine to use it, but given that that's what people who I know who work on this issue use, I just follow their lead.
Unhoused, you don't need a house.
I've heard people that live on the street.
You can live in someone else's couch and be homeless.
Okay.
So like when you say someone's unhoused, it's the implication that they should be housed. But but
why shouldn't they be housed?
You deserve a house.
You deserve a home, somewhere to live. Yes.
A home is different from a house.
Okay, sure. But I'm happy to call it unhomed if that, No,
I think it's manipulative doublespeak to control a narrative and shift and gradually shift positions.
I know
towards
dudes that
give people houses,
or people that have slept on the street that say, I have a home and it's right over there on Fifth Avenue, so don't call me homeless. And I'm like, well, you're sleeping out in the open. And it's like, but that's my home.
If you rent your friend's couch, are you homeless?
No, you have a home. It's your couch.
But you're unhoused.
Technically not.
You would be unhoused. Yes, you would.
I don't like this manipulative doublespeak where they change language and change the definitions.
Yeah, you don't need paperwork to have a home or a house. You just need to literally be some sort of housing.
But the issue ultimately comes down to, what do you say to a man of sound mind who chooses to not have a home and live outside?
Don't poop on my street. That's number one.
I watched a homeless person from my window one time poop on my car.
Yeah.
In Brooklyn.
I
called the police and I said, hey, I don't know if this concerns you. There's a person pooping on my car. What should I do? And they were like, you got a hose?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't got a hose. And they were like, well, you might want to get a hose.
Sooner than later, because that stuff's acrylic.
It wasn't good.
Acidic.
It was unpleasant.
If somebody makes the choice to not have a home, and they're so resourceful and so skilled that they can live out in the world like that, I say respect. I mean, good for you. That's amazing. I could never do that.
Well, in a tent?
I don't say it again.
In a tent?
Sure, yeah. I mean, but I don't think that's what most. I don't think most people who live on the streets. I don't think it's a choice. I think they're put there by circumstances beyond their control.
When I worked for the shelter network, I did 80% was a choice.
Yeah, I think
really,
80%.
80%.
Yeah.
Do you understand why that's hard to believe?
Because you've never worked in the industry and you don't know anything about. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I did spend a summer.
I'm sorry. Dude,
I spent one summer working with the unhoused population.
You think a guy who's.
It sounds like you have more experience than I do, because I just spent one summer.
It's just like go to California, go to LA, go like some areas in Westwood. I know UCLA's up there, so they push a lot of the stuff out. But I remember going to a shopping center somewhere. Where was I? Somewhere near Hollywood, slightly west of Hollywood. And it's like 5 homeless guys all living up against the side of a building. And a lady gets out of the tent, walks in the middle of the street, just takes a dump. Yeah. And when you go to them and be like, we got a bed, we got a private room, and they say, F you.
Because the shelters are terrible. They've all probably had terrible experiences.
And some of them are houses. Some of them are full houses, a 5-bedroom house. And you'd go to someone and be like, how would you like keys to a house and a bedroom? And they go, you got a manager there? I'm like, we do. Never going to happen. We're like, well, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Okay, so look, I can't extrapolate based on that applies then to the majority of the community. I just
you can make the argument.
But maybe you're right. But regardless, why not try at least? Why not give the opportunity?
What do you think all these nonprofits are doing?
Well, I think they're working within a very tough system to do what they can, but they don't have the resources.
I think the problem is Democrats.
Because we're spending all our money on wars, so there's not enough to give people.
I don't know if it's a 1-for-1, but I would agree with not spending money on wars and at least
giving a shot.
No, I'm gonna tell you. I'll tell you this. I would take every single penny from every single warmonger, and I would give it to one homeless guy who couldn't think straight. Because I'm just like, I can't stand this. We're better off. We're better off because in the long run, we save money if we're not engaged in these garbage wars for no reason.
3D print graphene homes for people, but the key is to get them in, to get them to want to take a shower and join the system when people are already checked out of the system.
We had some people who would stay in there were forever shelters and there were temporary shelters. And if you were a consistent temporary shelter individual, they could upgrade you or move you to the permanent shelter. There were legitimate people that I have met who were like, man, I lost my job and I have no friends and I don't know how to do anything. Like, if you give me a job, I'll do whatever it takes. These people have recovered. But these people don't exist as much in, like, the reason why homelessness tends not to be that is because those people will, given the opportunity, leave instantly. A guy is homeless for 2 weeks. The shelter comes up and says, We want to help you. He goes, please, I'll take whatever you got. 3 months later, he's sharing an apartment with some other guys, a couple $100 a month, no longer a homeless problem. But the reason why most homeless people you see in the street are there is because they want to stay there and don't want to leave. In Chicago, for instance, they use these bridges to make little villages. And in between each pillar, there's so the way it works is there's sidewalk and there's an elevated portion with pillars. And they set up beds in between each section. You will never get them to move. Jane's right there. John's across the street. This is my town. And so they're covered in urine. There's feces everywhere. They dump in the streets. And you show up and say, we want to help you. And they go, help with what? We want to give you a home and help you get out of the situation. I like my situation. Have a nice day. Leave. And so now we have the problem of, like in California, tents everywhere. In DC, it's happening. Tents everywhere. And it's leading to needles in the streets. We went to, man, it's so brutal. It was this really nice little historic town in Maryland. And I took a picture of syringes and condoms on the ground. Yeah. And I'm like, it's because we've become, and this is why I say there's no moral answer. Americans do not want to accept that you need some kind of harsh force and authority when it comes to what people are doing in public.
Yeah, that's what I come down to, man.
It used to be people wearing suits everywhere they went in the early 1900s.
And hats, too.
And hats. Don't know about all that.
I love it.
But there was heavy social and police enforcement. You're walking around drunk in public, they would lock you up. They still do sort of to this day, depending on the degree of drunkenness, but most people just ignore it now.
In my experience, people who are dealing with addiction and mental illness and other really self-harmful behavior are dealing with trauma, something really bad that's happened to them from a very, very young age. And what I would want to do in any kind of effort to alleviate homelessness is address that. And it's not, I agree with you that providing shelter and a home is not a panacea. It's not a one-size-fits-all policy. So it have to come with addressing the issues that make people destitute and desperate in the first place. And a lot of that has to do with suffering terrible experiences from a very, very young age or at some point in their lives.
Cultural shifts.
And if you deal psychological trauma, and if you deal with that, then you might be able to have the kind of shift that I think you're talking about. I can't vouch for your statistics. I mean, you've worked.
I'm talking about one city, by the way. Or I'm not talking about every city in the country or everywhere I've been.
But you're saying that if you went around to all the people in LA and offered them, a home, a place to live,
my friend, if you went,
the majority would not accept it.
Absolutely,
yes, really?
No question.
I promise.
I mean, look, and worse still, you might get physically hurt.
Yeah.
And it's not because every single homeless person is violent. I'm saying it's because there's a viral video of a homeless guy. Did you guys see this video? He had the knife and he was swinging at the lady who lived in the building. Because some people are crazy. And if you have 3,000 homeless people and you go around asking each and every one of them, you eventually counter someone who gets agitated and crazy. They're scared because, they'll take your stuff from you. They'll try and control you. They'll take away your drugs. They'll tell you what you can and can't do. They'll tell you when you can go outside and when you can't go outside.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to be in these situations. But if you tell someone, we've got a place for you to sleep, you can get cleaned up, they'll say, okay. And then they'll start using it to amplify the negative behaviors that were causing the problems in the first place.
Well, then I'd want to know why they have that drive to perpetuate their negative behaviors. And I would
why do people do drugs?
I would bet in 100% of cases it's because of trauma, because they've suffered something horrible in their lives, and this is their way of dealing with it. We can see that for people of privilege when they have an issue that's self-defeating, they have some sort of adverse childhood experience that they're not dealing with. So I'd want to know in every case what caused someone to be so self-harmful to themselves and other people. And I have a friend who volunteers every Saturday with homeless people in LA, and he has a different picture of the community he serves than you've had. And I'm not trying to negate your point. You have your experience and I respect it. I just think certain things that would need to happen to address this issue haven't been tried.
I try to interface with the broken people one-on-one, and it's not scalable. After I really emotionally connected with 50 broken humans, I started to go insane and I had to stop. I almost killed myself because it was so much pain. I had to empathize with so much pain. So that's not a sustainable. And then I'm just should we just be like those? Sometimes humans walk so far psychologically, they just walked off a cliff. Now they're feral and we got to treat them like wild animals. Or can every human be reached?
I think that's a possibility, but why shouldn't we do all we can to try? Why not? We put so much effort into war. Why can't we try to do everything we can to
I actually
to save
think it is our incessant need to try and help, actually, which is what contributing massively to the problem. And what I mean by that is we have created a society where we've enabled mass homelessness through these programs. If there was no food and no one gave them food, then they would just simply stop. And it's like the argument now is why I said there's no moral answer humans would be willing to accept. There's activist groups like Food Not Bombs, and they're like, did you know it's illegal to give homeless people food? It's really funny because you have these signs in the forest everywhere saying, do not feed bears, they'll become dependent and dangerous. Yet you also have left-wing activists who are like, we should set up a bunch of food and give food out to people, which is also particularly offensive. As I have actually, having been an unhoused person several times in my life, the implication that I was hungry simply because I didn't have my own place to live is like offensive. Like, what do you mean? I was playing guitar in the subway once. I was not homeless. And a woman asked me if I was hungry. And I said, no, but thank you for asking. And then she asked me if I needed a place to sleep. And I said, it was really funny. I was playing guitar, making pretty decent money. And I was just like, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm going to go back to my 2-bedroom in Bucktown and just play video games tonight. And she went, huh? Like the assumption that people who are playing music in the street, separate side note, are homeless. The assumption that someone who might be homeless is also hungry. These are all completely incorrect things. And I think it stems from these well-to-do liberal types in cities want to help, and I can respect it, but they actually make the problem worse.
But why not be touched that someone feels compelled to try to help somebody out, even if they got you wrong, they read you wrong? That impulse to try to help you, I think, is a nice thing.
So I'm not saying it's not, but if there's a dude who is constantly doing drugs and you're like, you know what, these drugs are really bad for him, but I'm going to help him make sure he gets the drugs done right. Like, I don't know if you're actually helping the guy. I think you should
it depends how.
Stop it
if
by
he's
force.
if he's using dirty water to inject heroin, then if you're giving him clean needles, I do think that's helping him because you're preventing him from you're helping to prevent him from possibly
Or you can just
dying.
stop him from doing drugs.
Well, you can't do that though, because the question is, why is he doing drugs in the first place? And 100% of the time, it's because of some trauma. And I'm very biased on this because I'm very biased on this because I have a father who works on this stuff.
But do you know what caused like the opioid crisis?
What caused the opioid crisis?
So a large component of what causes it is someone gets injured, they get prescribed opioids, and they get addicted, and they can't get off. Then when the doctor cuts them off abruptly, they go seek black market means of getting it and creates a bunch of criminals. So it's not so much about trauma, but like
not everyone who gets injured gets addicted to opioids.
Of course.
So the question is,
but a lot of people got prescribed it, and
Yes,
the
they did.
prescriptions turned into addiction.
And a
That's
lot of
not trauma.
That'd be physical trauma.
You know that Bayer,
lot of
the
people
company that made aspirin, created heroin and started marketing it to people who were addicted to morphine. To help get them off it.
But
And
look,
then
look,
doctors were
profiteering
prescribing
is certainly a
heroin.
huge problem. But the question is, why is there that? What does look? Addiction, drugs, it gives you a dopamine rush, and then you get addicted to that. Why do you have a need for a dopamine rush? And there's plenty of research on this. I recommend my dad's work on this. His name is Gabor Mate. He's a
I love his
physician.
work, man.
Yeah.
I've been seeing him all over TV lately.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm not going to speak for his work. But I'm just saying is consider the possibility that people who are addicted, it's not the drugs in and of themselves. It's what the drugs are doing for their pain. And I think unless you address that, you're not going to be able to.
Look,
address the issue.
There's a video I recorded. What was it? I guess I recorded it today. It's going to go up Friday because it's my one of my cultural segments. And it's a woman being like, I have to work so that I can buy a house, so that I can live in it, but I'm never there because I have to work. And this is the trauma. The trauma is we failed our younger generations. They don't understand that work is not a bad thing. They hate work. And so they want instant gratification. This is exemplified in what these cities are. The solution to the homeless problem is building a culture that refuses to allow and support homelessness. If a homeless person is living on your streets, they get removed by force. Where they go is entirely up to them. Or you can just say arrest them and detain them. But I think the police should simply go up and say you are not allowed to sleep on the sidewalk on public property. And the argument's actually gone the other direction. But then also people should not be giving free food to homeless people. There should be.
But why not?
Because it enables it. You are basically fueling the traumas of people. So instead of helping someone get clean and find a way to sustain themselves, you are basically saying, let me keep giving you more drugs. Let me sustain your.
That's what the safe injection sites do.
And now you've got typhus and bubonic plague. Bubonic plague less so, but it did emerge several times and freak people out. But typhus is all over the place. Typhoid
because
fever.
homeless people are being given food.
Because
that promotes.
So yeah, it's all rooted in. It all goes down to you reduce it. How is it possible for homeless people to set up mass encampments in these parks? People give them free food. If there's no food, they they have to go somewhere to get food. If we made it so that food could only be given to the homeless in like a place 70 miles away from the cities, and then all anyone could do is be like, we gave our contribution to the distribution center. It's 70 miles outside of the city. And that allowed for homeless people to go somewhere else to get resources because we want to help them. Then it keeps them out of cities and stops the spread of disease. That'd be better than just saying, I see you sleeping there on the ground in your own waste. I see disease spreading and wild animals and mange. Let me give you food so that you can keep doing it. And you can't enable bad behaviors. You have to, like, someone is hurting themselves. You don't say, what can I do to make sure you keep doing it? We say, how can I get you to stop this, improve yourself, and become self-sufficient?
There's been a lot of programs that are like trying to help people get jobs. You know, remember Kimberly Klasick?
Yeah.
She had this whole not-for-profit that was designed to give women clothing that they could then interview in. It was like professional clothing for women who can't afford professional clothing. And she helped all these women get jobs because she gave them like the right outfits to go into a job interview and look presentable. There's a lot of different ways that you can help people without facilitating a degenerative lifestyle.
Yeah, you mentioned how feeding the people is feeding the problem. And Michael Schellenberger has done a lot of reporting on the California homeless problem and how these organizations, these multi-million-dollar charities are receiving money to fund the people, and then they just keep receiving money to keep funding the problem, and the problem never ends, because if the problem ends, then the charity goes away and they lose their job. So they've kind of got an incentive structure. There's like an industry built up.
That's like what happened to the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign was founded to get gay marriage passed, and then once gay marriage got passed, they switched to trans stuff.
It's not just that, it's Greenpeace. Every major nonprofit that's looking at mass revenue, they're thinking to themselves, look, I don't want to lose my job and I don't want to fire everybody. So what is the mission of this nonprofit? Well, if problem X has been solved, we must come up with problem Y. Most big major NPOs are operating on some wild tangent far from their founding missions.
You know, I want to be intellectually honest. So I think there's elements of truth in what you're saying. There is an NGO industrial complex. I've seen it up close, so I get it. And there is an incentive to keep people destitute. I don't want to deny that. But fundamentally, since I've never seen an actual mass scale effort with all the resources that we have to really address this issue, to really meet people where they are, to try to address people's underlying trauma, I'm not willing to endorse this punitive approach where you have to make people go far away to get food, where you have to try to lock people up. Well, because you're basically saying that you have no right to be here. If you want to eat, you have to go somewhere else.
If you want to receive free food, we've got it for you down the street. That's not punitive at all.
But then you're also infringing on the freedom of me. If I want to give someone food, you're infringing on my freedom to give them that food.
And that's the problem. So I said there's no moral solution. You can't ban someone from giving someone else food. But then the problem is,
I would agree with you if we had actually tried to address this problem seriously. And given that we haven't yet, there hasn't been. Again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but all the money we put into war, if we put into this issue, and it still didn't make a difference, fine. I think the solution is actually relatively simple. We need better. We need better jobs. We need to abolish the Department of Education. We need to get people. How would that help?
So the Department of Education, like all of education, has gone, and test scores and everything has gone directly downhill since the founding of the Department of Education.
Yes,
but
then
I'm being personally provocative, but the point is that we are not teaching people how to function and survive and live well. We are teaching them dependency. And that was my point. When this young woman is saying, why do I have to work to pay bills? You shouldn't have to. You should want to. The problem is, human beings that are being raised in the United States over the past few generations are being raised in such a way that work is some alien thing that is painful to do, whereas it should be enjoyable. A guy who likes building tables should be like, man, I built 3 tables today. I made a really cool one. Take a look at my table. Some people have this passion. Instead, you get young people who are like, I literally don't want to do anything. Now, I can certainly understand not wanting to collate papers and file TPS reports. That's nuts. Some people are into that. The issue is that there are many, many people today who want to do nothing. So what happens is the people who are living out in the streets who want to do nothing are enabled to do nothing and then create a strain on everyone around them. This is causing people to flee cities in California and move in mass to like Florida and Texas, where things are very, very different. This is not a sustainable system. So we need a I say it's really just, vote Trump. There you go. Have a nice day, everybody. We need We need to educate young people. We need to inspire young people. We need to stop promoting college. College is a waste of people's time. It's not helping anybody become functioning members of society. A liberal arts degree is not something that can help build or create or maintain life. And so you got a lot of these young people who are like, I know everything about folklore and mythology, but I'll be damned if I could fix change a car tire.
I'm one of those people, so I get what you're saying. I do. And but again, I think this comes down to how you view humanity. I think your experience with people, and I understand that you have a direct experience with this, so I respect that, has left you with a more cynical view of how people operate. Most young people I know, they want to do well, they want to have meaningful work, but there's no opportunity for it anymore.
But
what does that mean, though?
The other thing too
meaningful work means
meaningful
means you're doing something that you feel is an expression of yourself that's contributing to the world that you find meaningful.
How do we develop that passion?
Well, I mean, that's a question of circumstance too, like how you're able to grow up, how privileged you are. I mean, all that stuff.
And it's an issue of privilege. Privileged people don't like working. And so when they grow up, these are the younger generations are some of the most privileged people the earth has ever seen. And so when you take someone who 0 to 5 years old, what are they doing? Sitting in front of a tablet. 5 to 13, they're going to school, but it's mostly nonsense work where they're getting participation trophies. Then they go to high school. Nothing changes. Then they go to college. The entire experience is just do what you're told and we'll provide for you. They graduate and they're like, I don't want to do anything. Whereas what it used to be is, for me, I grew up homeschooled as soon as super early ages, preschool. I'm doing education. I worked at the family business when I was 9 to 11 years old, took the train and the bus by myself as a little kid, working a job, making money and buying the things that I wanted. I had the internet ever since I was a kid. So I'm reading things online all day, every day, and just learning stuff. And it's more and more interesting every day. Wikipedia was a game changer. And then I started just doing things I wanted to do, got good at them. And then all of a sudden, what happens? When I'm 18, I am better than all of my peers at basic skills. I have already had 2 or 3 different jobs. So I know how to apply. I know how to make a resume. They're struggling with these things. They don't want to get jobs. They're going to school. Oh, I'm going to go to college instead. They graduate from college, they can't find any meaningful work. Why? They have no experience.
Okay, and that's an issue.
That's what I'm saying. Department of Education gone.
Well,
strip away this education industrial complex.
The other thing too about meaningful work.
Rather than abolish the Department of Education, why not actually invest more in the education system?
Because it's not working. We're throwing good money after bad.
Well, but
at this point,
we've also undermined it with charter schools and actually underfunding the education system. I know plenty of people. Everyone I know in the education system are hardworking people who are trying to do the best of their
matter.
kids.
You know why?
And they're dealing.
There's 2 words that break down any argument you might have, and you know what that is? School sucks.
School does suck.
And every kid says it, and they've said it for 50 years, and we've never stopped to ask why kids keep saying school sucks. And then what happens is you get older people being like, well, it's because we're sponsored. Nah, not true. Every video of every kid super excited by the science teacher who's making a rocket ship out of a balloon or something, or doing the thing with the big water barrel, the water jug, and then they light it and the fire goes poof and shoots out, and they're super excited and having a blast. The problem is those people are so incredibly rare. School sucks. And the answer of let's give more money to what sucks makes literally no sense. Kids from from when I was a kid to previous generations have been screaming the machine is broken, and we just tell them too bad.
Well, plenty of kids also would hate eating their vegetables, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't eat their vegetables.
Wrong. You get Gordon Ramsay to make broccoli and spinach and Brussels sprouts for a kid,
you just
and they're going to
season that shit, man.
Wow.
Okay, so there you go. So then season school too. Apply the same logic. Apply the same logic.
So when you have a bad chef, you don't give him a raise. You fire them and then try and find a better chef.
Most teachers that I know are wonderful people who are doing their best.
I don't know,
because
like,
they don't have the support they need. Their classes are overcrowded. Special needs kids don't have the support they need.
That's not the issue.
Education's never been seriously funded because we're too busy funding
There's so much support for special needs kids. Like I'm seeing.
I'm sorry, I'm a broken record.
I agree the foreign wars things is bad, but like that's not a 1-for-1. We should certainly take whatever funding from all the foreign war garbage and put it into our own infrastructure.
A big part of the issue is the curriculum is trash. The way it's being taught is bad. The teachers, no matter how hard you say that they're working, like I literally watched them every day for a year and a half when my son was home with, because of COVID and whatever. And they were teaching him, they were doing like lessons about white supremacy and systemic racism instead of teaching him math They were doing all of this stuff. They like for a recent science project he had, the point of the science project was to write a biography of a scientist who was not a white male. And my kid was telling me about this class, and I was like, don't do this assignment. This is trash.
Let's just simplify it. Aaron, can you explain to me photosynthesis?
At this point, no, I couldn't.
But why did you even bother learning it?
Well, because at a certain point, it's important to grasp these basic concepts. And in my particular case, I don't have a very scientific mind, so I'm not a good example. Somebody who paid attention to science class.
I feel bad for all the kids who weren't as lucky as I am, that I had entrepreneurs in my family who taught me basic work function and like business management and stuff.
So you are lucky. That's great, but not everyone has that.
I know. And so my thing is like, man, how can we stop the corrupt system that is hurting these people and give them something better that can make them happy and passionate and successful? And
why not give them the same support that you had in your family to be able to learn?
So here's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to have your family lose their house. They're going to have to risk everything on a small business that fails.
Yeah.
And those life lessons will help them learn the value of hard work and make them passionate about improving and succeeding. But if you give them more money for things that are broken, I think you'll get the opposite outcome.
Or you look at your case and you say, wow, how amazing is it that this family went through all this and still struggled and made it and was able to produce someone like yourself who has knowledge, who is self-sufficient, and saying that's a wonderful thing. Let's make sure everyone has the basic opportunities so that if things go bad, that they're self-sufficient too and they have knowledge, rather than underfunding their schools and denying them services.
Schools are not educating kids.
Well, they could. I mean, I agree with you. It's a serious problem. And COVID was a...
And this is the problem.
Yes.
This is the problem I see with the left. Our nation has, this is how I always describe it. Everyone's going to say, oh, here goes them again. This country has a wound on its arm. The wound started bleeding, and that is our kids need to be educated. This is a problem. So what do? We put a bandage on it and said, that'll help solve the problem. And you know what? A bandage on a wound is a really good idea. And then 3 weeks later, we looked down at it and it was covered in dirt and grime and it was festering. And someone said, I don't think that's helping anymore. I got an idea. Let's put another bandage on it. So we slapped another bandage on it.
I get the metaphor.
You got necrosis, baby.
Uh-huh.
You got necrotizing fasciitis in the education system. And that's why I'm saying, stop it. Start something else. We need a dramatic overhaul of look, man, if Bart Simpson has been saying since the late 80s, school sucks, and it was a laughable idea that everyone agreed with, the system was broken. We've all known it's been broken. And instead of saying, hey, maybe we should stop the thing that sucks that everyone hates and try and reassess this and create something different, the answer just seems to be every single step of the way from the left is just give them more money.
I don't have the fidelity in children's opinions of school that like you do, because...
Oh, come on, you know school sucks.
Looking back, I can think of plenty of times when I thought school sucked, but looking back on it, I benefit a lot from having an education.
You don't have, but are you talking about college? Because school is not education.
Both elementary school, high school, and college, I really benefited from, even if at times I didn't enjoy it. I mean, kids don't enjoy things when they're difficult and they're boring.
And the
but
issue
you still
is
benefit from it.
The presumption that what you experience in schools was beneficial versus the alternative of not being in school. There's no control for that. In fact, there could be. Technically, it's me. I'm a high school dropout.
Yeah.
So when people keep saying to me, yeah, but you're lucky, you're the exception, I'm like, I'm the exception that I stopped going to these state-funded institutionalized learning facilities that jam your head in a box and take away your ability to survive.
That obviously worked really well for you. I just don't think from that you extrapolate that that's a solution for everybody.
Yeah, I'm not saying my solution is a solution for everybody. I'm saying the mechanization and industrialization of what we would call learning has failed.
It's not, people aren't learning properly. It's school, and it might be education, but
we're going to try and get some super chats in. We got to get super chats
I've always enjoyed learning, but I like interactive learning. I think the best way to do it is one-on-one. If you have your teacher and your student, maybe your parent and the kid, but I mean, it's a big ask for society to start schooling their kids.
No, I got solutions. Let's talk about this more in the members only so I can at least read some super chats. Clint Torres, of course, is number one, saying howdy, people. And also, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the show with your friends. Go to timcast.com, click join us. The uncensored show will be up in like 13 minutes or so, but we're having a good conversation. So, all right. Alpha Turkey says representation matters. The MCU proves that a diverse woman can direct a flop just as poorly as a white man. There you go. Yeah. The Marvels is the biggest Marvel failure.
Yeah, like all time, like officially, right?
It's the lowest box up. You call it a failure. I'm being mean. It's the lowest box office opening of any Marvel movie at $47 million, and we all know exactly why. Sorry. They made it's like the movie is quite literally a poster for diversity.
I'm starting to fall asleep just listening to
it's
the
like
description.
a Benetton ad or something. It's
It
like
is.
the Benetton Marvel movie.
A white woman, a black woman, and a Middle Eastern woman teaming up to fight a black woman, and it's like,
Is there a bald guy in it?
there is.
Is he the villain?
No, he's Samuel L. Jackson. He helps.
Okay.
There's no bald villain in it.
I meant bald white guy is what I meant.
I literally don't care about diverse casts in the literal sense. It's when they ham fist these stories with wokeness and like girl power stuff where it's just like, stop, please. You're patronizing us. But let's read some more. Shane H. Wilder says, if Clint doesn't say howdy people, did the show even happen? It did not. We actually leave. We like, it's 7:45 and Clint's not here. We just
Is that Clint Torres?
offline.
Torres,
We gotta go. We gotta go.
He's there.
Yeah. See, at first it was Raymond G. Stanley Jr. If he had to super chat, and if he didn't, we were concerned. But now he's here all the time, so it's just like
Shout out to
now
Rage
it's
Master
comfortable.
G. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, rocking it.
Brown Bear 992 says flamethrower clown 2024. On MSNBC, they said Trump is a clown with a flamethrower, and a clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower, or something like that. So hey, we should make that shirt.
That's actually really cool. Yeah.
I hope someone's listening. Can we make that
It
shirt?
should be like Bozo. Bozo the clown.
Like
Remember
the clown's
Bozo?
like, and then out of the flame is coming Trump's face, and he's going, like making the same face as the clown. But you
Or like
can tell the clown
crusty.
is
Could be
Donald Trump.
crusty.
Or it could be Trump with clown makeup, blowtorching, like
It could be that.
like a corrupt symbol of
Yeah.
corruption of some
Like a
sort.
swamp.
Yeah, he's burning a swamp down. Don't just drain it.
And he's wearing a Letitia James t-shirt.
Yeah, that could be it. Wow, man, YouTube got rid of a bunch of super chats. That's super annoying.
Yeah, man.
The FCB5 says, I'm center right, but I stand with the left on Israel. Well, all right. Common Sense Fishing says, I know my history. Was originally occupied by Jews. Arabs came out of Arabia and conquered it around 600 BC. Even though Jews lived there, it was technically ruled by Arabs for 1,500 years until 1948.
Yeah, but before that, it was the Canaanites. Abraham died over there in Canaan, and then his great-grandson was Judah, and the kingdom of Judah followed that. So way before the kingdom of Judea was Canaan.
There's a song that was really popular a while ago. It's called This Land Is My Land. You ever see it?
Oh, yeah.
And it just shows all the different groups that go back and forth over claiming the land. Kind of crazy. I don't think it's overtly critical of any one group. It's just showing the history of the region and all the different groups who had waged war on it. It's kind of crazy.
It's like humanity is the game of land acquisition over centuries.
The story of humanity is taking land from other people.
And energy consumption.
Yeah.
These are the two things.
Finding better ways to extract energy from various systems.
Man, if we could just build land, if humanity just
What do you mean?
siphoned off volcanic molten lava into the ocean to make new islands and stuff, or
Well,
just
you look out Iceland,
or
right?
created
They're having
geysers
some
of magma
issues.
from under
They're
the
having
ocean.
volcano issues in Iceland,
Oh yeah.
Redirect it to the
Volcanic
coasts.
right?
Maybe we could
push it out
we could buy a bunch of land in Iceland and give it to the Palestinians. And
You know what? That's not a bad idea, right? Like everyone just move around.
okay,
Take
Iceland
the
is
whole
awesome.
North Pacific garbage gyre and just like pour concrete on it and
Well,
make
the-
that an island.
if
don't give
you
us
so
that.
have you ever watched videos of it?
The North Pacific garbage gyre, yeah.
It's not dense.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm joking around here.
So people think they call it a garbage island, but it's like, well, there's a lot of garbage
it's a
floating there.
gyre. It's a like.
But it's like when you're floating in it, you just see speckles of garbage. It still looks like the ocean, but people are imagining it's this like thick, dense spattering of garbage. It's not really.
What about Albatross
gross, though.
Island? Isn't there like an island
Pitcairn.
covered? Yeah, that's what it is. Pitcairn.
Pitcairn? There's like 58 people living there.
Yeah, and it's like covered with trash.
You can make an island out of trash. Richard Soa.
You can make structures
different
out
guy.
of trash.
We've solved the Israel-Palestine conflict.
and the
we are
homelessness
going
problem
to-
because you can build houses out of trash.
We are going to
Bottles.
create a series of islands, and
You know who's really good at
Gift
that is
Palestinians
Dubai. Dubai is good at that. Why isn't Dubai just doing that?
They're okay at it. A lot of their islands are kind of going bye-bye now.
Oh, really?
unfortunately.
That big like palm tree island
Yeah, like
thing?
the world and stuff.
It
yeah.
it collapsed.
It's in the process of doing so. The ocean
Okay.
is saying, I want this stuff back, actually.
We'd like our
Yeah, I wanna-
we'd like our place back.
I want a geyser magma straight up from the bottom of the ocean in certain places and just make these islands.
Doesn't Hawaii have that
That's
That's
potentiality?
how, that's how all islands
Yeah.
form, actually. But don't stop
Alright.
getting CCP ideas, guys. They're going to start making islands in which place they don't necessarily like. Yeah.
we'll read some more. Paul Tascalo says, as the left aligns with Palestine, haven't heard a peep about Sharia law, awful culture of domestic violence, 20% of marriages are an adult male to a female child bride, Homosexuality is illegal, strange ally for progressives.
This is Palestine, they said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's illegal to be gay. It's 10 years in prison.
Keep in mind some of those domestic violence things. Like if they live under oppression, that can cause the disruption of the family too. Like if you're stressed and you go home to your wife, you know, that can affect your relationship.
You know, there isn't actually Sharia law imposed in Gaza, but regardless, no matter what you think about that.
There is not, you said?
It's
Well,
not.
there is.
Sharia law is not official inside. Yeah. Hamas has floated it. I'm sure they'd want to, but regardless, no matter what you think about all that, they don't have the right to. Israel doesn't have the right to occupy them and besiege them and kill them and deny them food and medicine. That's my fundamental point. How the people of Palestine in the territories govern themselves, that's up to them. But what I don't want to do is support anything that can be used to oppress them and displace them. I think that's
don't care. I don't want to provide funding for.
I'm with it. That's fine. If we get to the same conclusion, I don't care how you got there.
Morally, though, if we were talking about Native Americans and we were, you know, like doing all this today, I'd be like, we should stop doing this stuff.
Okay.
Like, if we were talking about, you know, millions of Native Americans on a small land, I'd be like, guys, we gotta have a solution. This is not working. It's going to get worse. However, the Israel-Palestine thing is I'm just like, look, I care about the morality of humanity and the death and all that stuff, but I'm saying politically, we don't even need to argue about the morality of the region because I think America shouldn't be spending money on all these foreign countries. I think I would rather take all of the money spent on all of these foreign countries, put it in a big plastic ball, roll it up to a random guy named Rick's house, and just give it to him and be like, you're a trillionaire now for some reason. Literally don't care. You are the king and have fun with the money because it's better spent on you than anyone else. Hey, look, an American guy or woman in this country with all of that money is infinitely better to me than whatever garbled nonsense we're doing.
I would push back in that I would have pushed back because the conquest of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Lebanon, where else have we taken? Libya. We haven't really taken Syria. Libya, we kind of have taken Syria. Libya, Egypt, Syria. We have puppet state. Israel, puppet state. It's because we needed oil. But now I'm like, well, we can create hydrogen fuel with this byproduct of graphene.
No.
And we can turn the oil into graphene, so we don't need to shut it down.
We don't need the oil. We just need other people not to have it. The point is to control whether or not they can grow and what they can do.
So
that's correct.
Maybe we can let go. I don't know if that's even.
Yeah, I'm like, I love the idea of secure our borders, bring our jobs and manufacturing back, restore a solid American culture with good moral foundations. Like that means life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That means individual liberties, meritocracy. It means we don't keep work. Like these people who are like, why do I have to work and pay taxes just so I can struggle? I'm like, well, I don't agree with the work thing, but at least I can say this to these young people. I completely agree with the fact that we're paying taxes, which goes into garbage. Look, man, fix the roads. You know what I mean? Let's just we'll build a bunch of roads. I don't care where they go. Just anything is better than us being like, why are we spending 2 decades nation building in Afghanistan?
Yeah, improving roads is key.
In 2021, the U.S. gave foreign countries $52.4 billion. And since
that's it?
Yeah.
That'd be more than that.
It's what it says. This is 2021.
Here's what we're going to do. 52.4 billion.
Since then we gave 113 billion to Ukraine.
Wow. Okay, so here's what we do.
And Joe Biden wants another $60 billion because he needs that war to continue until his re-election campaign.
In 2021, it was 3.3 billion to Israel, 1.6 to Jordan, 1.4 to Afghanistan.
Okay. I propose this.
I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Gotta fund your puppet states.
I propose this to all of America tonight. That $200+ billion, that all of the future, so it's already been spent. I get it. So from this point forward until forever, anytime a bill is passed or some kind of plan or whatever to give money to a foreign country, no matter what they think will happen, the bank account gets all redirected to Ian.
Okay, then we're going to use $500 million of it to create closed system nuclear recycling systems to create thorium salt.
You could buy a historic collection of Playboys for all I care. You get the money, no more warmongers.
My Uncle Sid would love that. He had a historic collection of Playboys, and he kept them. He kept them in the like front room, the little front room, just in a little stack between 2 chairs, both of which were covered with plastic because that's what my Aunt Dora did. You couldn't sit on anything.
Let me try and read some more here. I'll try and get as many as I can. Captain John says, Tim's 100% correct. I have a homeless father and brother, both drug addicts. They are out there by choice. I gave my brother a home and a job, and he chose to go back out there. I knew a dude who he would make like $250 a day.
Yeah.
He would put a Folgers can in front of him and then go to sleep on State Street in Chicago. And then he said, I just go to sleep during the day, wake up, it's full. He walked into the bank and he poured it into the change machine, and then they added it to his account. Then he would go and like $250 a day.
Not bad. Yeah.
But he was a drug addict.
Right.
And so I was like, man, you're making bank, dude. I wish I made that much money. What do you do with it? And he goes, oh, I do heroin, man. And I was like, oh, well, that's really bad. Like $250 a day, you'd be living like a king. And he's just, yeah. I'm like, and that's why he was messed up and was.
I've had similar experiences. Trying to help people that don't want to help themselves is not possible.
No, it's not.
It's exhausting.
Baron of Gray Matter says, we spend so much money on the homeless in Washington State that you could give each homeless person $150,000. Is that what he says? $150,000. It's the homeless industrial complex. It's big business. So much money in it, it will never be fixed. I agree.
Yep. Same with LA, man.
You know, I learned one of these shelters. My favorite thing I learned was that they would pitch that their shelters were at capacity, and so they were in desperate need of donations so they could expand. And the reality was all the shelters were empty because the homeless people did not want to be in them. And so I'm like, I didn't know that. And when I found it out, I said, I can't lie to people like this. And they're like, but you need the urgency. And I'm like, I'll just not mention it. What? I can't work for these companies, man. That's why I didn't want to work in the industry anymore. They all lie. Nonprofits, all of them. The only ones that are good are the small ones, where it's like, we're here to rescue puppies. And then they do. And you're like, oh, that's great.
And it's like two people in a house, and they also live in the house, and they take care of puppies.
Yep.
I like those places too. I like puppies.
Yeah, man. All right, let's see.
Everyone
Polly
likes
Puree
puppies.
says the original Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. Cream soda had heroin in it back in around 120 years ago. Whoa. And when they made cocaine illegal, Coca-Cola was like, let's do caffeine. Why? Because caffeine is extremely psychoactively similar to cocaine.
Oh, wow, that's good.
I've discovered that myself.
Look up the physiological reactions between cocaine and caffeine. You'll be like, that sounds very similar.
Wow.
It is indeed. It's very much indeed similar. But we just don't snort caffeine or anything like that. We just eat little bits.
That would be weird, right? If somebody was like snorting caffeine, you'd be like, what is that?
Yeah, I've never taken caffeine pills. I knew
No,
people that would
I
do
can't
that, and
handle
that
that
sounded
either.
like you could overdose on that stuff. So I
Seems
never got
bad.
into it.
Joseph Metzler says the U.S. spends more on education than on defense. Wow.
And that's
really?
wild because people aren't learning properly.
Dal Lamar says Baltimore, $21,000 per student spent. Money is not the solution, never was.
That's true in New York too. Like the huge amount of money that's spent per kid, and it's a disaster. Like the education is not doing
It
anything
should
good
be
for anyone.
fun, man. Learning is so fun.
Learning
Yes,
is really
but school
fun.
beats
but
it out of
sucks,
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I hate
Okay.
sitting still. It's
Let's
like
let's
so
talk about it. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the show with your friends, and head over to timcast.com. Click join us, and we are going to rag on school. Although Aaron may disagree, but it'll be a good conversation. So become a member. That's going to come up in a few minutes. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Aaron, do you want to shout anything out?
thegrayzone.com. I also co-host a podcast called Useful Idiots. That's at usefulidiotspodcast.com. I do that with my friend Katie Halper. I'm also on Substack, mate.substack.com.
Right on.
And as usual, I always want to shout out the Post Millennial, thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com. And we'd love if you would subscribe to the Post Millennial at thepostmillennial.com/subscribe. Thanks.
I'm Ian Crossland. Thank you. And Aaron, good to see you, man. And we didn't get too much into your expertise, which is war, Middle Eastern war and conflict, especially in Ukraine. But on the after, you mentioned something on the show about when does defense of your nation go too far? Like how much of an attack can you do and still call it a defensive maneuver? The Romans, notoriously conquered their neighbors out of defense of the capital. So I'd love to talk more about that.
We'll get into it.
And also follow my videos on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel, Ian Crossland. Check out Friday, Jimmy Corsetti. We went hard on Atlantis, and then I talked to Michael Lane building a space elevator on the moon on Saturday, and that's going to happen. So check it out. See you there.
And I am Serge.com. I have nothing to say. I hope you guys have a good day, and let's go to the after show.
We'll see you all over at timcast.com in about a minute. Thanks for hanging out.